So, Krascsi, welcome in, my friend. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing perfectly fine. Little bit tired, but nothing that would just stop me from appearing here. Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome, awesome. Love to have you. Love to have you. So, I thought about going about it, and essentially, for the viewers watching, Krassy's gonna coach me. It's gonna take me through some ideas. I'm also gonna come in with my ideas. We're gonna take your questions also at the end. So hopefully everybody comes out learning something new. Uh, as a first, Krassi, do you mind telling me some introductions about who you are, some experience in your aim, maybe some credentials that you have?
Oh yeah, of course. So I've been aim training. I've been in the scene for like 5 years, as I just checked, based on my YouTube videos
Mm,
that I have. Um, I've worked with a lot of people, some more uh, like famous content creators, some pro players from Valorant or Overwatch, some people who are trying to make it in Apex 2. Uh, Mostly started aim training due to Fortnite. That's where I
Oh,
learned about this
really?
whole thing. Yeah, actually. And then I realized that I really like this aim training thing. And I
Hmm.
played all kinds of shooters with my friends, actually. And I really liked how it made me better in all of them. So that kind
Okay.
of became what I really focused on, not really maining one thing, but just uh, performing as good as I can in all kinds of games.
Okay. And when you started feeling these gains in Fortnite, you mentioned that you felt it across other games as well. Was that instantaneous, or did you have to like figure things out slowly that like, oh, maybe static helps you more or this helps me more, or was it like you were just playing like a default playlist, or what was sort of your beginnings like?
Oh, by nature, I really hate wasting time. I like high
Yeah.
ROI things, so I instantly started like searching for all kinds of resources that existed. Um, I actually, when I found out about aim training, there was another Discord server uh, before I even joined Sparky,
Yeah.
which was mostly about these human benchmark kind of things. I got
Mm.
really obsessed with that for some time, and I think I noticed improvements really quickly. Like as I played, I got better, and when I started hitting plateaus, I had to, reassess what I'm actually doing, and I just kept iterating.
Okay, okay. So you would say like that's really interesting because you were kind of early on the scene and you immediately just started doing what was popular at the time and you just saw instant results. It's curious because now we have a lot more information and still people are not seeing results or still doubting or saying it's useless and stuff like this. Do you
But yeah,
do you think that depends on the person, or do you think that depends on his approach? Like, let's say he's just slow to learning, for example, or what do you think?
yeah. So, I think general playlists and information it's just really good when you're starting out. Um, I think the downside of having so much out there right now is
Yeah,
it's really difficult to pick, you know? So people are kind of like it happens in like all kinds of fields where you can just kind of tutorial hop, you know?
yeah, yeah.
You're never sticking to one thing. I think what I did was I tried to stick to one approach for a few weeks or even months, and I really
Hmm.
tried to see what was the reasoning behind the scenarios, the order, the how much training should be done, sensitivity, FOV, all that stuff.
Okay, okay. So that's sort of like a similar approach to me, actually. I would sort of like take a piece of information. Let's say some person say, "Hey, play static," and I would sort of like just main static for a while and sort
Mhm.
of just do like trial and error. Be like, "Hey, does this work in practice, or is it just like something a person says essentially?"
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. And I think that's sort of the stage. I think that's still relevant today because, as you said, there's so many different opinions, and it's very, very easy to get lost, right?
Yes. And obviously, it's also somewhat on the person too, how they approach things in general or learning,
Mm.
how competitive they are, how much they actually care, you know, that all matters. Because otherwise, these work as multipliers, in my opinion, on the time you actually put into improving.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So essentially, if you're learning slow but also doing the wrong thing, then it's gonna like hinder your progress a lot more. Regardless
Yeah.
if you're a slow learner, but perhaps you're doing the right thing, it's like plus minus zero almost a little bit.
Actually, the I've worked with. I think I started for free,
Hmm.
consultations and stuff like short-term stuff, and I just transitioned into longer-term stuff like a year and a half ago. And what I've worked with around like 200 people, I would say overall. And what I noticed mostly is um, that people really get stuck to one thing when they are starting out, and they at some point they lose awareness of how they are actually
Yeah,
playing, and that's when it's like the problem is uh, people usually tell others to just code review and stuff, but if you're so used to doing something, it's really hard to notice.
yeah. I hear what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
think that's super interesting because I do a lot of like bodybuilding or working out or whatever, and I would notice that I would do like a specific technique, like let's just say heavy weights, go
Mhm.
practice heavy weights, and then that technique would like slowly stop working, and I'm the type of person that like quickly then changes that techniques or switches it out for something else. But I can definitely see that so many people that do work out just stick to the same technique that worked originally rather than
Yeah.
adapting or renewing or trying to find like a new way. Because essentially, like, I'm not, that technique stagnates to some degree or something similar.
Yeah, it takes like a lot of focused attention and like being able to uh, critique your own play to actually identify the bottlenecks. And then you actually have to do the thinking to find solutions to those bottlenecks.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting how some people are able to find those solutions quicker than others, and some people are just more, I guess, analytical or more aware of their mistakes, is exactly as you said. And I think that that leans into learning quicker because you're more aware, essentially.
Yes, I think so too.
Okay, so I thought we will also go through what you do, like for your students and stuff like this, and we can discuss things live as well.
Hmm.
So
Awesome.
So if I'm a new student and I come to you, uh, like from my perspective, I would give them like some questions and I would give them, hey, play this playlist, give me this VOD, give me stuff like this. What would you do?
Usually how I like to start is I ask them to send me some scores of some benchmarks. I like to use the Voltaic Season 5
Hmm.
benchmarks, even if they are not playing it mainly. It still like gives a pretty good look on how they are actually doing,
Hmm.
And they send it before the first call usually. Of course, I ask some questions about sensitivity, mousepad, and just I guess you could say like the basic stuff. And when on call, I like to discuss the kind of practice they are doing, and the kind of a goal setting thing, like what we are actually trying to achieve. Because just getting better is, it's not focused enough to make like measurable, meaningful progress in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And how important do you think, for example, your mouse is, or for example, yeah, let's just start with that. How important do you think your setup is? Do you think it's super important, or is it something that's like, as long as you have something okay, or do you think like grip affects your aim a lot, or what's your general theory?
Oh, as long as you have like a decent amount of FPS that's above your monitor's refresh rate, and of course, like getting a higher refresh rate monitor will help you a lot.
Hmm.
Um, I think mouse pads, they do matter, but not as much as some people make it seem.
Yeah.
Obviously, like I have tried, I would say like three different parts of the spectrum when it comes to mouse pads. I
Hmm.
played the Hayate Otsu mid for quite some time. I mained it. That was I had my best KovaaK scores on that in most scenarios. But I really wanted to try glass, and I had the Skypad, the original one, and I had the 2.02. And that's when I actually started really enjoying trekking, because it felt like I have nothing really limiting me, but static felt horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So then I took like 2 months and I really grinded static on glass, like 30 cm per 360. Uh, I got like Nova scores on some older voltaic benchmarks on that. Well, my wrist suffered quite a bit, but yeah. And then I actually bought the Aqua Control Plus, I think what it's called, and it's more on the slower side. Uh,
Okay.
so
So,
it does matter, but not for when it comes. Have there was this AimLab competition thing, right?
okay.
Yeah, and there Matty actually swapped his pad
He
for
he he
some scenario, if
he
I
he's
recall
sorry.
correctly.
What?
He swapped his mouse pad for something else for
Okay.
some scenario. Yeah, so you can get higher top scores, I would say, on certain mouse pads, but general skill itself, developing that doesn't change that much. It's the
Okay.
same principles.
So, sort of diving into that, where would you say that, like, if some person comes to you and he has very little skill, his mouse pad probably doesn't matter, right? But if he's sort of in the quote unquote like more advanced aimer, more used to aiming, it might have some slight differences. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and actually some mouse pads highlight some mistakes more, or some aim like not so beneficial aiming habits
Wh-
more.
wh- Why do you think that is? Is that purely a speed or versus a control thing? Could you get the same thing, for example, changing your sensitivity? What is your thoughts on that?
I would say generally the faster the pad is, the easier it is to make micro corrections, but also the harder it is to um, uh, really accelerate flicks and then slow them down. Um, when it comes to people, I've seen a lot of people who are pretty good, like usually top ranks in Overwatch mostly, who have really good aim when it comes to precision, but their smoothness usually uh, holds them back. Because you can do small stutters and stuff and still stay on target, but it's not gonna be smooth. And then their reading gets all messed up. And if you put that player on a glass pad, the small shakes, the small like jitters, and like it's like a fax machine, or a printer.
Yeah.
uh, like as that gets highlighted so much more, and it's way easier to show that, yeah, this can work in certain situations, this kind of aim, but if you're trying to track like a Lucio on a wall, for example, it might not be the best tactics. Like you
Yeah.
need to always have specific tactics for different situations. And I think that's kind of what you can practice in aim trainers.
Okay. And do you think like going based off that, do you think that there's such a thing as like raw aim compared to in-game aim, or do you believe that both of them are sort of the same thing? Like some person who does great in an aim trainer may not perhaps do great in game. Do you think they're separate, or do you think it's because he's doing something wrong in an aim trainer?
Actually, if you're, let's say, you're trying to get really good at aiming in a tech shooter like CS or Valorant,
Mm-hmm.
and let's also say that you're really practicing reactive tracking because you want to improve your benchmark score and you're really grinding that hard. Usually, what happens is that the in game performance drops. It does matter what you're actually practicing on a day-to-day basis, because I think if you want to make truly meaningful improvements, you have to have smaller bursts of focusing on one thing at a time, and you should do that until you actually make that thing your own, in a sense. But I don't think that so let's say someone does really good in an aim trainer but doesn't do that well in a game.
Mm-hmm.
That usually happens, I think, because of the game sense part. You know where to put your crosshair, how to move. Movement is huge. It's very, I don't know how to explain. It's just
It's
such
a
a
big
huge
deal
part.
for sure. Yeah.
It's incredibly huge. Even in something like CS, just knowing how to peek, that's huge.
Hmm.
In a game like Overwatch, uh, being hard to hit, also really difficult. And also, what most people kind of miss out when it comes to aim trainers is they don't use movement tracking scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that would be like really important, because knowing how to use your movement to actually correct your crosshair and not your mouse all the time, you know, you free up some of your resources on your aiming hand.
Yeah, yeah. I've been trying to tell people. It feels like forever to just play movement tracking, but it's like some sort of block with people where they inherently think it's bad, and I think it's to do with like the patterns where like you don't move the same in your game. But I'm trying to explain to those people that it's not about patterns; it's about correlating, your both of them together, sort of. And that's I brought that up in my latest video actually, and
Mhm.
I think that's like because I see specifically in Valorant people when I coach, I see it so frequently where they move and they have to essentially stop fully before even moving their mouse. So to they move, they stop, and then they initiate the aiming part rather than to do it sort of together. In
Oh
CS,
yeah.
most people do it together, so they end up landing when they stop their movement, they end up landing on the person's head rather than a Valorant player who lands in the air or whatever.
Mhm.
It's such a huge thing, but for some people it just doesn't click in some people's head for some reason, right?
Yeah. Also,
uh
something I've noticed that like people are quite dogmatic about sometimes is not playing scenarios that have pretty easy to learn, like learnable patterns, movement
hmm,
patterns, because they think that's not raw aim and that's not gonna help in their game.
yeah,
But I think that's plain wrong.
yeah, I hear
Uh,
you. So it's
I
it's
don't know if
sort
you
of
have like, yeah,
it's sort of like a person would go into like close fast strafes before learning how to handle centering. So he can't even
yeah,
track like a linear target that's moving slowly, and he just wants to boom have the hardest stuff ever. Is that sort of
yeah.
what you mean?
Yeah, and that's also exactly the reason why reactivity is usually one of the most difficult things for people to get good at, because there's no clear progression that's like given in any benchmarks or
Hmm.
like structured routines, or at least not none of that I've seen before. So learning that is like really difficult because tracking something smoothly and reactivity does have really similar parts, but they are not, of course, exactly the same. People think if you just know how to do the reactive stuff, the smoothness stuff will be easy, but that's
Hmm.
never the case.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In my experience, I feel like smoothness helps reactive more than reactive helps smoothness. I mean, they're definitely like everything is sort of combined in a way,
Yes.
exactly as you said. But I definitely have felt that like people play like a super hard reactive scenario and they can't, perhaps they react, like their reaction with the mouse said is okay, but their ability to track it afterwards is horrible, and especially when it does multiple changes in directions or different patterns, and this person can't even track like bounce 180 properly. So it's people automatically want to move to the hardest, most advanced thing ever before even laying down an ounce of the groundwork. And I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought, what do you want me to play something, or how's the how would you typically do it?
Yeah. So, is there anything you would specifically want to improve at right now?
I don't play a lot. I don't have any time. I don't even have time to aim chain anymore. But when I do play, I like to play anything target switch heavy, anything click heavy,
Mhm.
like any type of COD style of game, any type of CS:GO style of game. Just yeah, stuff like that in general. And sometimes I play stuff like Overwatch as well. I play pretty much everything, or not Overwatch, but tracking heavy stuff. I play pretty
Mhm.
much everything. I would say.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
In that
and
case, yeah.
mhm. No, go ahead.
In that case, I just checked out the scenarios in this playlist you have opened right now.
Oh yeah,
I, yeah, yeah. I think we could check some of these out.
yeah, sure, sure. Do you want me to just start?
Uh huh.
Okay, awesome.
Have you warmed up before, or is this like a first touch of the mouse of the day?
This is the first touch,
Okay.
and I got one full session in on Monday, a
Hmm.
40-minute session in, and I was gonna do it on Tuesday, but I was working too much, so
Hmm.
I've gotten one session down for the day. But whatever, it is what it is. Hopefully,
Yeah.
you can spot some patterns and whatever. That's something I want to ask you about, and you can perhaps take it when I play. Do you look for patterns, or do you look for habits, or do you look for just like, is it an intuition thing for you, or how do you judge things? I'll turn off the sound.
Well, usually I I watch a person play and I try to grasp what's the biggest limiting factor, and based on that, I like to give further scenarios to make sure it's actually what I'm thinking. Like the problem is what I'm thinking it is, and then I'm trying to give cues uh, to actually make some kind of a change. I'm trying
Hmm.
to make the client aware of what they are doing by making them play really specific scenarios that highlight uh, their inefficiencies. And then I propose some kind of a solution, I guess you could say, with a cue. And if I say the right cue, they usually find find out and they understand what the problem actually is.
Okay, so le- that's something I want to talk about. Let's say you have a person that is overflicking. In my experience, like just you can take it from your perspective first. Do you think there's always a right or wrong answer to deal with that, or do you think it's sort of like issue specific that it's not like, hey, just play pokeball? It's just like a general thing to say. Do you think that applies for every single one, or do you think it's specific to different people?
Mm, well, I would say it's more specific. Actually, it's not as simple as just saying you should play more of this. Especially for people who have some kind of for people who it's not that easy to spot their own mistakes. It's
Yeah.
like if you are the analytical kind, I can just tell you to play this and you will probably find out what's wrong. But if you're not that kind or you don't want
Mm.
to, yeah, then it's just
Yeah, I
people
hear which.
just don't usually like. I coached Silky Crisp before, and with him, if I recall correctly, we adjusted his posture actually, because I was like something is wrong here. I was like, if you're aiming like this, there's probably something that's off about the way you sit or the way you have your arm. And as soon as we fixed that, like most of the other problems went away. So I think it's a system, a lot of smaller things just working together.
Okay, so it's like a combination of patterns, how he moves and stuff like this. Because the way, from my perspective, when I have somebody, for example, coaching, and let's bring up this issue of overflicking, and
Mhm.
he's not overflicking in static, but you know what? He gets into game, and then he starts overflicking all of a sudden, and that's like a pretty common thing for me. And the main thing for me is then to not be like, it's a generalization to be just like, hey, play pokeball, and that may be beneficial to that person. But I like to primarily look at his speed, because if like he has a lot of speed and that makes his flaws like come out more, that's essentially how he's aiming in game with more speed, and that's why he's overflicking in game, because he's essentially like using all this speed in game, but then in KovaaK he's moving like super slow, for example, and he's unable to handle larger targets or speed or whatever that is. Do
Yeah.
you do you take like a similar approach, or do you take more like posture, mouse sensitivity approach, or what do you do?
Oh, usually I start with scenarios, and then if I still feel like some problem is still there, then I start asking. Like usually I ask for a picture
Okay.
from a decent angle, from the side or from over the shoulder, kind of thing.
No feet pics, right?
No,
Oh shit, unlucky.
and then yeah, because if you're it's really easy to put unnecessary stress on your system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think most people really tense up when they are playing. And that, of course, results in like these small like tremors of the muscles. And that makes it like incredibly difficult and fatiguing to aim.
Okay, so if you, I don't know if you've been watching Maine, but
Yeah,
do
I
you
have.
have, okay, so let's say you're watching me, what would be the initial response? Obviously, I'm rusty as fuck, but that, who
Yeah,
cares?
yeah, yeah. I would say you're slower than you could be.
Okay, so you want me, do you want me to push speed more?
Yes, but not just. Yes, first let's just try pushing speed. Let's see what happens.
Okay, awesome. Do you essentially take the person through like, because I do sort of like that when I have a client, I'll be like, hey, push speed and see how you react, and do this and see how you react. Or do you think that there's a set way for like, hey, just do this and this is will be correct 100% of the time?
No, like even if I can make like a really educated guess, I wouldn't dare to say that I'm correct like 100% of the time. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I I have to see actually what's going on.
So you think it's wise for people who are watching to, for example, try to, hey, I'll do one run where I push speed and I'll do one run where I push accuracy and I'll see the differences and I'll see how it feels in game and stuff like that.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, awesome. Then I definitely agree with that as well. I'm trying to push speed, but I'm actually pretty slow.
Yeah.
So some people come to me when they push speed and they're like, hey, I'm doing so many mistakes. What do you think there's an acceptable parameter of mistakes, or do you think like, hey, my body will automatically learn from the mistakes?
Oh, that's a good question. Uh, I never liked the idea of really focusing on the mistakes. I
Mm,
think things do adjust with time. I think, of course, with the right cues and the right things to focus on, but you can't make the person think about like, so many theory, so many things at the same time, and
yeah.
ask them to play and perform at the same time. It's just so many things to keep in mind.
Exactly. It sort of becomes very overwhelming for a lot of people if I like, hey, hold your mouse like this. Hey, do this. Focus on this. I'm giving them 1,000 things, and I completely agree
Yeah.
with that. Because some people want 1,000 things, and then they're like, their main issue is just that they suck, right? Like they don't need 1,000 things. They just need the
One thing.
basics, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But as we discussed earlier, people are quick to want the most advanced, quickest fix of all time, right?
Yeah, for
Okay.
some reason it's like really in the whole community for some reason. The fundamentals and the basics, who needs those?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
exactly.
I
Yeah.
think actually I as I'm watching you play, it sometimes feels like you're really trying to make it seems like you have a distinction in your head between uh like you break down the flick into two parts in a way. um it doesn't seem like one thing. uh it feels like you try to hit the target while pushing speed in one straight flick,
Yeah.
but I don't are you using a cloth pad?
Yeah, cloth.
I don't really see. It's like you're trying to stop instantly
Hmm.
in some way. It's like I there's no acceleration and deceleration
Yeah.
that
S-
much. And when you flick really quickly from E to B, and that B is not on the target, you have to make some kind of a correction. But for that, you have to actually register that you're not on target. And that results in you having to, from a quickly stopped position, correct back. And that takes a lot of time, you
hmm.
know?
So essentially, if I'm hearing you correct, I'm in short, I'm snapping super hard and then adjusting very slowly. Is that sort of what you mean?
It's like you're doing a hard flick in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where you're not accelerating and decelerating that much. It's like an instant stop. And at the same time, if that misses, you have to do the same thing. It's like you land on a different target that's not there, and you have to aim at another one that's closer in a sense. So you're
Key.
missing like a whole, like, I don't know how to explain, like a whole loop.
So if I understood you correctly, you want me to focus more on decelerating.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'll play a run with no decel or like with more focus on deceleration and still pushing speed. While I do that, could you mind explaining what you meant at the end where it was like shooting at two targets? I didn't fully understand.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So when you're trying to flick to a target and then you land somewhere around that target, um, it feels like you are way too sure about landing on the target before you actually do the flick, and then you have to actually react to having missed the target. It feels like you're hitting another target that's not there near your original target.
Okay, yeah,
Then
I
you
got
have
what you mean.
to hit another one. Yes. So
So
it becomes choppier.
I understand. So essentially, you're saying I'm just flicking anywhere near the target, like a zone around the target, and then I just say, "Hey, I'm gonna adjust now." So that's what you mean with two. I'm hitting like an
Yeah.
invisible target and then the correct target. That's what you mean.
Yes.
Okay, I got you. So now that I focus on decelerations, do you feel like I'm still keeping a decent speed, or would you like even a more speed push?
No, it seems pretty good for now.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you like to see something other than target switching or specific scenario, or where would you take it?
Oh, actually, I really wanted to check out the um, there was the temp speed and one under that, the horizontal white small one.
These two. Okay. Do you have a preference
Mm, as, as we are right now, we were doing flicking. Let's check the 1 by 2 targets one first.
on what targets? Okay, awesome. That's something I think is super beneficial and something that I've always tried to master is structure. Do you think that that's important? For example, if you have a target switching scenario that works the initial flick or whatever, do you think that you should then play, for example, static because then you're practicing the initial flick and then the quote unquote micro and clicking part? Or do you think that you could train static and then tracking and then target switching and it doesn't matter? Or do you see another approach being
Oh.
important?
Yeah, so actually, I found different results with different people, which is really interesting.
Okay.
There are some people who really like practicing all kinds of things at the same time, like uh, tracking some dynamic clicking, and they want to do some static switching, and they're improving just fine. There are people who learn way more when they have more uh, team based playlists. Let's say we really want to make wide flicks work well, then I would put multiple scenarios in there, which make sure you practice wide flicks at like different ranges or distances from each other. But first,
Okay.
I would probably put some kind of warm up scenario that's like bigger targets, you know.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that, let's say a person comes to you and you see his gameplay and let's say he struggles with micros. Are you the type of person who's like, "Hey, I'm going to give him 5 micro scenarios," or do you think that you should split static up into different fields, or how do you look at that?
Well, static, I would say um, one really. I would break static down into multiple parts actually.
I agree.
Um, One thing is the two target static stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best for games, I would say. Just the
Why
long
is
flicks.
that, would you say?
Um, because most people have a really specific range on their mouse pads on which they are really comfortable, and then having scenarios that force them out of that
Mm-hmm.
usually show like really quick improvements. And white
Okay.
flicks are usually like quite uncomfortable, you know.
Yeah.
Like you
So
have to look at the with your peripheral vision like to the side of your monitor, and then have to make that big flick, and then you have to make it back to the other side.
yeah, okay. So you think essentially because it's an uncomfortable position and you're using your mouse pad perhaps in different ways that you're learning? Is that your the approach?
Yes.
Okay. Because I think about it perhaps slightly different, but I think they might be correlated. So the way I think about it is like there's essentially just one way to go when there's a one wall, two targets. It's
Mhm.
one target, one target, one target, exactly like you said. So
Yeah.
there's minimal pathing in
Yeah.
the scenario. You can only go one direction, and that's to the other
Hmm.
bot. And the wide angles, and I think you were onto this. Perhaps you just use slightly different terminologies, but it's like the same shit. I
Yeah.
think when you have this wide flick, and I've been always telling people that like play wide scenarios, when you have this wide flick, you're essentially forced to split the flick into two parts, and that ensures that almost always a micro will
Yeah,
be practiced essentially.
I
Is
agree.
that sort of similar to how I thought about it, or is that a different uh, view than you
Oh,
would use, or do you think it's
oh
similar terminology?
no, it's just like that actually.
Okay.
When you have like one target on static, it's mostly, the reaction time kind of stuff. Two
Hmm.
targets is exactly what you described.
Yeah.
And when you three, if they are like far away from each other, it's still the same. But at 4, 5, 6, it's more about pathing and chaining and just
Yeah.
smoothly going between targets and clearing up the map in a
Well,
sense.
one thing that I've found is that when there's 1v2 targets or one target, it's a very clear direction versus I don't know if you can see my screen right now. If there's
I
like
can.
5 targets on screen, I'm gonna exaggerate obviously, but you're just stressing to like reach all the targets and you're trying to click as many targets as possible rather than being like, here's the target, here's where I'm gonna go, here's what I'm gonna do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to see Tam speed or do you have any comments on my 1v2?
Actually, one other thing is when it comes to this multiple target stuff, something that I've seen actually a lot of people like being held back by is uh, unironically clicking speed while moving their
Hmm.
mouse. So I really liked to make people play stuff like 119,000 targets, uh, in like a clockwise or counterclockwise direction. Just getting used to, cleaning stuff up while actually not really trying to confirm if you're on the
Okay.
bot because they are so huge.
Yeah, yeah. So you essentially would uh, 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 put a person to play a scenario like this, which in my initial like playlist that I play, I put something similar on, and I think it's very important because if you can't hit a target fast that's large, you can't hit a target that's small fast, right? So
Yes, I agree.
you have to be comfortable with the large target before moving on to the short. It's very similar to what we were talking before about basics. So I'll play this one for you, and you can go about like, hey, I see this, I see that. You have good speed, you have bad speed, or
Mhm.
whatever.
I wonder why your bots look so weird.
I have these. I have these.
Setup?
Yeah, yeah. I like seeing a person.
I see. Okay, I didn't know you can do that. Wow.
It's
Okay,
really
okay.
cool. Yeah, there's like an anime skin and everything now in KovaaK. It's funny.
If you miss, just keep going
Yeah.
in the direction you were going initially.
Okay. So just go right all the time, for example.
Hmm.
Okay, got you.
The clicks feel a bit heavy in a sense.
Okay. Could you define heavy?
It's like you're so I think with all the different kind of static scenarios we just discussed, uh, these kind like each of them requires a slightly different way of aiming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say this one requires more flowing between the targets,
Mm-hmm.
less hard stops on each, just more moving and more just getting. The most important part on this is getting the intuition of where your crosshair is compared to the target and
Yeah.
knowing when to click without actually hard confirming.
Sort
Because
of
if
sub.
you're playing some,
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
if you're playing something like extra small, you can't play it like this. But
Yeah.
hypothetically speaking, like static, if if we were robots, it wouldn't matter at all how big the targets were.
Yeah.
But because we are humans and we make errors and mistakes, we need to choose the right strategy for different stuff.
I
And I
hear
think
you.
this is like a pretty big bottleneck for most people.
Hmm.
I've seen people play like one or two targets or three targets pretty well, and then they jump on six and they get like the same targets. Uh,
Yeah.
it's because they are really not comfortable with just hitting a lot of like clusters in
Yeah.
general.
So would you say that like the way I understood your terminology is sort of like this is more subconscious, raw reactions, raw speed, versus if you play like a slower target, a smaller target, you are focusing maybe more on confirmations, on accuracy, and blah 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 stuff like that. Would that be accurate?
Yes, yes, it would be. Yes.
Okay. So how would you deal with someone, for example, because, for example, take me, this is a perfect example. I know that I could probably, if you give me like, if I practice a little bit more and I'm more consistent in aim trainers and I play the scenario, I would then probably do better at the scenario, right? I'm
Yes.
just rusty and I'm ass right now and whatever. So, where would you say that, hey, you will just learn in time? And when can you see that a person, it's too difficult for them to learn? What are some common habits, some patterns a person could look for? Give you an example. Let's say I'm playing this one wall 900 targets, and I'm just over flicking like crazy. Like I have the accuracy like 50 or something. That would be like overly, quote unquote, overly hard for me. But if I have like 98% accuracy, maybe it's too easy. So where's the balance there in your eyes?
Ooh, this is very interesting because I think actually for most, the biggest difference between static and tracking is that on static you kind of define the difficulty of the scenario
Mm,
based on how much you push and what exactly you're pushing. While on
true.
tracking, you're basically given a certain pattern that you have to track.
Yeah.
So I would probably instruct the person who's getting only 50% to start really slowing down and just start getting the clicks when until they get around 90% or 95%, and then slowly start speeding that up. And if someone is getting like 98 to 100% accuracy, I would tell them to go slightly faster.
Okay. Okay. And in terms of um okay, I'll give you an example of something. I agree with what you said, by the way. I agree. I'll show you an example of um what I look for example. Maybe you can correlate or maybe you think differently about it. And I think that will be interesting to have two different perspectives on something.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm always, and I think the best thing that you could take away in some degree, it's also exactly like we said, it's a pain to have so much knowledge, but it's also needed to have so much knowledge to narrow down what actually works for you and what doesn't. So I think two perspectives, even if they're not aligned, as long as they grow a seed within the person, an idea within the person, that's ultimately like the best thing for the community, I think.
I agree. Yes.
I'm just trying to find this fucking scenario. I have so many scenarios in my head. I'm sure it's the same for you, that it's like you get lost.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know like 1,000 or like 1,500, like off the top of my head. And
Yeah.
sometimes I also have like a problem to search for them. Like it's just,
Yeah, because you know what scenario you want, but you don't know what it's called because there's like a million variants.
yeah. And those also have like a 3 to 30 different variations that are exactly the same, but named
Yeah,
differently. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, when a person would like, let's say it's like wide wall six targets, but he makes his own version, he'll name it like 4BK click or something like that, and it'll be like
Yeah.
the same thing essentially. Anyway, if you can see my screen, correct? Do you want me to
I
stream on Discord?
yeah.
Maybe it's quicker.
Oh yeah, like we can do that. Yes.
Yeah, I think that'll be a little better for you
No
personally.
delay. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
I can see. Perfect.
Awesome. So the way I look for it is like, let's say a person sends me a VOD of this, and he's just over flicking. What the fuck happened? My KovaaK just crashed.
Yeah, I could just see the stream post.
Yeah. Also, everybody in the chat will take your questions at the end. Thank you, everybody, for dropping by. Me and Krascsi are just having a huge yap session right now, so hopefully you guys can benefit from it. Hopefully my KovaaKs can fucking load up anytime soon. Maybe it's the. I'll try lowering the stream. Actually, the stream quality could be useful. I think my KovaaK takes such a long time to start up just because I have like a lot of. When you make a playlist, an online playlist, KovaaK has to read through that playlist or something like that. So the more online playlists you have, the longer it takes to start.
Yeah, I
That's
actually
really annoying.
I have this habit of clearing out all the playlists I make for clients every once in a while, because I had like 600 or something at some time, and that was just so many.
Yeah.
So slow to load, and when I was searching through stuff there, it just took such a long time.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
I have the exact same thing. You know, you get the little. I'm not sure you probably did it. You get the little KovaaK's like recap. I think it's called.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
Remember.
I think I had something like 923 playlists or something like that. Like how is this even possible?
Yeah, so I just zip it out every once in a while and just put it somewhere else out of my playlist folder, because
it's too much.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting to look. I sometimes look back at the others, like other playlists I made for people.
Yeah.
Like what could I have done better and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to see how I thought at the time.
Yeah, I agree. That's something I'm heavily into. I like that we sort of think similarly in a lot of things. If a person will come back with positive feedback to me, I will go through his plan and sort of like, oh, he said like, oh, week 1 or week 2 or whatever felt good. And I'll sort of recap like, oh, I did this and his issues was that. And then I'll write it down. So I'll have like for the next person that comes along and he shows me similar patterns, I know that, oh, this is probably the approach we need to take. Do you do something similar?
Oh yeah, I'm actually really trying to work out some kind of a system so I can make this easier for myself. But
Yeah.
yes, I do the same thing.
Okay. Bad news. I think when I stream on Discord, I think my KovaaK crashes for some reason. So we're gonna have
It's
to
fine.
do
I
with this.
can watch on YouTube. It's perfectly fine.
Okay, so back to the point I was making before. If I have somebody who's coming to me and he has these targets, for example, and he will overflick. I take this exact example in the video, but if I'll overflick 8 out of 10 times, then that's probably a pattern that I'm overflicking too much, and it will also come out in game. Versus like if you're overflicking a little bit less, maybe you can push speed a little bit more. So do you also have a similar thing where you look for patterns, or is it more intuition based for you, or you don't think that's true, or what's your perspective?
I actually think that for me, patterns and intuition are really interconnected. Basically, what I think I improved a lot as a coach, not necessarily because I have like groundbreaking aim training theories, but more in the sense of how I can express myself and finding the kind of cues and scenarios that actually fit people, because everyone is slightly different.
Yeah, exactly. So if when you look at, for example, a scenario like this that I'm playing right now, time, speed, whatever, It's you can think of this as a quote unquote realistic movement pattern. Like if you want to go that far, you can think about it like that. Do you
Hmm.
think that these realistic movement patterns are more beneficial to your game, or do you think that you should have a balance between like your weaknesses, patterns in game, fundamentals, or do you think that like you just see somebody who has no skill, for example, you just give him fundamentals, or what's your approach to that?
Oh yeah. Let's say someone is coming to me who's pretty much a beginner. I will try to teach them the fundamentals first with a slight
Mm,
focus, like slightly more weight or emphasis on actually the reason they came to me with. Like, let's say someone wants to get better at Apex, but also at aim training and doesn't have good fundamentals at all. I
yeah.
will teach him fundamentals through easier scenarios with like few more scenarios focused on tracking. And as that person gets better, we might drop a few of the clicking and switching, for example, and put in more tracking and more movement stuff.
Okay, yeah, that's aligned with exactly how I think actually. It's great to see that because to me it's important also to have like when I knew that I was like doing something right was when I was getting positive feedback from my clients. So
Mhm.
that positive feedback is like, huh, something is working. So it's good to like see similar thoughts as well. But I think it's super, super important to exactly as you said, do some fundamentals and work on everything. So like if you're an Apex player, don't just drop static no static whatsoever. Because you have to realize that everything is sort of combined,
Yes,
as we talked
exactly.
about. And for me, it's like the way like to do it is like 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 weeks, depending on how bad the person is, of like fundamentals, and then the last like 3 or 4 weeks will be a little harder, will be a little more in-game, pattern-based, reactive-based, whatever you want to call
Mhm.
it. Do you do something similar, or do you give him like 1 week of fundamentals and then boom, or you give him 4 weeks of fundamentals, or does it depend on the person?
Oh, yes, it does depend on the person. I always ask for feedback, even if you're not having that many live sessions a month, through DMs. Like,
Mm,
I like to check their stats out, how their scores progressed, some feedback in a sense, like how it felt for them, because it's not just numbers, because we don't have the tools yet to make it just a numbers thing yet. Even though
yeah.
I tried actually.
It's very difficult to purely look on score. I think score can be a very like beneficial metric, but you also have to not progress your bad habits. Because if you're progressing your score but also your bad habits, in my experience, it can have like more negative impact in game. Do you think that better score always equals better aim?
Ooh. Well, if of course there's this factor that scores are slightly random because of spawns and movement and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if that was not the case, there's still, I would say, maybe look at the moving average, not necessarily at the high scores. But I do
Mm-hmm.
think that improved scores do mean better aim. But the actual impact of that when you try to translate it to other scenarios or even into in-game, uh, it's gonna get smaller and smaller as you get better and better, I would say.
Okay, okay. So if what if a person comes to you and he's like, "Hey, Krascsi, I'm improving in one ball six targets, and it's really feeling better in game, but it's really feeling better in KovaaK, but in game I'm just missing things." How was your response to that in terms of like if you've set up a structure for him to improve? Do you look at the weaknesses? Do you look at the score? Do you look at what's your metric sort of?
I would 100% ask them to send me like 10 minutes of combat from the game, and then I try to see if there's some kind of an overlap between KovaaKs and the game. I would also probably make them play some scenario that kind of replicates the in-game stuff slightly more, or more like the issue that I'm actually seeing, and then I would go from there. I'm a,
Okay.
I guess you could say I'm a really big fan of not always giving a person a completely new routine. I really like, I call them like evolving routines. Like they scenarios get changed, swapped based
Yeah.
on feedback
Yeah.
and score progression and feel. Uh, and I think that's like that's what I found to be the most um,
Beneficial.
efficient way. Yes.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree with that because, and I was yapping with I had an podcast also with Samir, who's a CS:GO guy, and I was
Mhm.
talking to him essentially that we as coaches have an idea or a thought or a recommendation about your aim, but that doesn't mean that that's the only answer. What we also need is the person's feedback, how he feels, what's going on with him. So like if I have a like I think he should play pokeball, for example, but he says, hey, pokeball just isn't working out for me. We can obviously look at why that is, but ultimately, in my experience, what he feels is on par or sometimes more important than my theories about his aim. Do you think that you, as a coach, obviously you take both sides, but do you think that there's always something you're like, hey, no, this is what you need to do, you're just doing it wrong, or do you? What's your thoughts?
Ooh, I don't think I've ever been like, no, you're gonna keep doing this.
Forcing them.
Maybe, yeah, if I'm really skeptical that they are messing something up, then I would want to see it. And
Of
if it's
course.
actually something that just is not clicking with them, then of course we are adjusting. It's fine to, you know, not make the right call for the first time.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
kind of like fine tuning, when it comes
Yeah.
to AI models a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing, like, if you're interested in getting coaching by anyone, I think the best thing you can do is to take advantage of that person's knowledge, because a lot of people will, in my experience, I have it written like everywhere, like, hey, if you have an issue, contact me. But some people will come back at the end and they're like, hey, I didn't like this scenario, and you're like, it's like, well, you said that kind of 4 weeks too late. We could have adjusted it. We could have worked on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're planning on getting coaching, be active, taking part, because you have to realize that both me and Krascsi are both busy people. We probably have a lot of other people yapping to us. So make yourself loud. Essentially, would be a tip of mine to get the most out of your money.
Yeah. And also, something popped up in my head, something I
Mm.
usually like to ask from clients on the first call is if they just want me to give them the plan and we are just adjusting it, or if they actually want to hear my thoughts behind the stuff. So they essentially learn over time.
Yeah.
Because I think what's truly important, I mean, the kind of coaching that I love to do more is when after, I don't know, a certain amount of time, the client can just do it all by themselves because they learn the critical thinking, the observation,
Yes.
the scenario repertoire, and just that stuff. Like I know people, I've had clients who actually coached their friends and like all that stuff, and it's amazing
Yeah.
to hear and that it's
Yeah.
actually working.
I I I value pretty much the same. Like for me, it's super because we as coaches can't hold your hand 24/7. We can't click the mouse for you, right? So knowledge in itself is going to be almost as important, if not more important, than the actual playlists and tips we give you. Because we reach these conclusions that we have now through trial and error, through questioning things, to doing that. And if you can have that same mentality, you will also reach similar thoughts that we have. So there wasn't something that's planted into our brain. It's something we have to learn. And teaching people how to learn. Is such an underrated thing for coaching, I think.
Yeah. I'm always trying to explain my process in a way because I think it's the best way to learn in a sense. Like you're watching someone who's, I would say, like relatively good at what they are doing, and just seeing how they do things, and you can ask questions, like why are they doing this? Like what's the point here? Why would you not do this instead? That's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the fastest way to learn. And
yeah,
basically coaching, I would say, I think for most people it's mostly saving time, because I'm pretty
exactly.
sure most people would come to, I wouldn't dare to say the same conclusions, but something similar at least. They could figure
Yeah,
it out, but it might take someone 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 hours, while with coaching it could be just like 10 times less.
exactly. That's what I try to tell people who tell me that, like, for example, because obviously it's like a niche thing to get coaching within aim trainers. It's very, very niche. And people who are like, hey, I don't want to spend money on this, which is completely understandable, right? Everything is out there for free. You could learn everything, but you have to question it yourself. Hey, do I want to spend time, or do I want to spend a little bit of money on it? And that's just based off how you are as a person and what you value.
Yeah, of course. And I think part of coaching is also like um you're you have to you are held accountable uh by a
Yeah,
coach a little bit. Some people really need that. I
for
think that's
sure.
also like a pretty valuable thing.
Yeah, I had a student who was like, because obviously you try to be like as polite as possible, but sometimes there's no polite way to say things. And I had a student that was like, "Hey, I want you to be as mean to me as possible."
I've
And
heard this
because
too, actually.
you heard it too, right? Because they sort of get this motivation or this push, like you said, from being like, "Hey, you suck! Like, step up your game, stop being ass." Instead of giving them the details and this and this. It's sort of like the whole inner game of tennis thing, where you just yell at someone, or you show them rather than explain things.
Yeah.
Okay, so I played a couple scenarios. Is there anything you want me to show you, or any thoughts that you have, or something? Yeah,
Actually, I would be really curious about how you would handle Fugla pressure. I
yeah,
don't know if you know the scenario.
yeah. Of course, of course. It's a staple. I love the Fuggle pressure pokeball. That's like one of my loves, one of my secret
Mhm.
obsessions. But yeah, I'll start playing. Okay, thoughts.
Can we check the scenario called the static speed test too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay.
This one, correct?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Thoughts?
Um, Something really interesting I found is the smaller the target, the slower you actually flick to it, uh,
Mm,
up to the point where it doesn't even look that much like a flick, more like a smooth tracking kind of thing. I
okay.
guess it's because you want to make sure you hit it, you know,
Mm,
accuracy, stay precise. But I would love it if you try to be a little bit
a little faster?
um, yes, don't make that it's not just faster
Hmm.
on everything. um, don't make that much of a difference uh,
I
between like the targets. Yeah.
I hear what you. So because it's small, I shouldn't decrease my speed. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And while I'm playing, maybe it's I don't know if you're if it's possible for you to like analyze and take a question at the same time, or would you
Oh
just like to
yeah,
analyze?
I think I could do that. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we've been playing, for example, a lot of static. What do you think is there a first question, is there a goal that people should reach for? For example, a static goal? And second question, what is the use of static in game, do you think?
Hmm. Mm, I think around Jade on the voltaic benchmarks is a really good goal to have.
Okay.
Um, what does it do for games? I
Yep.
think it's mostly. I'm kind of split on this,
Hmm.
especially recently, because I haven't been playing that much static. But let's say my aim in CS, for example, didn't get worse. I've actually been prioritizing stuff like popcorn and such
Mm.
because I think the point of static is being able to accelerate and stop your mouse and click accurately. And yes, you do need that in some situations, but there are way more situations when you're just holding an angle or they are picking you and stuff, and that's not exactly static. You kind of have to
Yeah.
read some movement. You have to place your cursor in the right place and click at the right time. And I think dynamic, like small dynamic clicking, um, which has like easy to read targets, those are way more beneficial for those kind of things.
Okay. So, um, for example, I'll take it like this. When I played the scenario and I tried being a little faster, I my accuracy got decreased. I like to
Yes.
tell people to have like higher accuracy when playing static, but now my accuracy decreased. Do you think that's acceptable? Do you think that like it will be learned over time because it's bigger targets, or what's your view on that?
Mm, I think you kind of have to move uh, one variable out of the comfort zone, and then the other one will slowly catch back up to it with practice. So it's either accuracy or it's the number of targets, right? Or the speed.
Okay.
So I think it's acceptable to get a lower accuracy, as long as you're actually trying to keep the same tempo and that accuracy over time gets better.
Okay. Okay. So it's, if I catch what you're saying, it'll slowly get better over time, but you can only, in your terminology, you should focus on accuracy when it's an accurate scenario and speed when it's a speed scenario. Is that correct?
Uh, Focus on that more, but even on a speed scenario, accuracy can be a problem and vice versa.
Mm. Yeah. I
So it's really like a case by case basis,
because
I would say.
something I am super into is how the scenario you're playing will affect the next scenario. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. Let's say we have a Fuggle pressure scenario,
Mm-hmm.
and I put the Fuggle pressure first, and then I put like a one wall, 6 targets extra small. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
one speed scenario and one very accurate scenario.
Yes.
My terminology and what I feel happens is that, okay, you're being pressured in the pressure scenario, so you're going to move faster, you're going to push speed a little bit more, and then that should and hopefully will transition to your when you're playing your accuracy scenario. So in my structure, I have now attacked speed and accuracy. Do you think that structure is all like, hey, now it doesn't matter, your brain will learn this anyway? Or do you think that there's some truth to that? Maybe like if you're playing a tracking scenario, you're playing a very small one, then a very big one, or a big one and a small one, for example.
Oh, of course, I think it makes perfect sense. Ordering scenarios is really important. Having a good structure, I think, can make a routine like just infinitely better.
Yeah.
Uh, as you said, it each scenario does have an effect on the next scenario, and leveraging that when you're making a routine for someone else can make improving way more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. What's like a generalization of, let's say you're doing a fundamental playlist, what's like a general structure you can recommend for most people to use? Like, should I play target switching first? Should I play target switching last? Should I play static first? Like, what's the, because the way I think about it is like, TS is the initial flick. Pokeball is the initial raw response. So I put that first, and then I put, for example, dynamic, because that will help the confirmation, blah, 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 blah. So is there a routine that you consistently use for like a general amount of people? A structure.
Okay, so it depends on if I'm doing some playlist that has a little bit of everything or if it focuses on one thing mostly. If it has a little bit of everything, I like to follow um, some kind of smoothness like tracking at the start. So it's kind of a warm up in a sense, your whole arm and everything. And then I like to do some kind of control tracking stuff.
Okay. Like a control
Then
sphere.
something like that, yes. Then I'm split on this. Sometimes I like dynamic clicking, sometimes I like static clicking more after this.
Okay.
It depends. But I like to have one of both. Something like passo, let's say. Passo reload, and else could work for static. Something like one wall, 3 targets, just on the normal wall, and then I like to do some switching because the way I think about it, switching needs everything.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, when you warm up your arm a little bit, with the smoothness stuff, you make sure you're not all jittery, you know. You have the control stuff, so you have to use your wrist a little bit too, and then you're still not tired. So I kind of think you can choose a little bit between static or reactivity. I don't like to do both on the same playlist. I think it's really taxing.
Okay. So
Um,
wait,
and
can
then
we
I
just
do, yeah.
so, sorry, can we just go ahead. I'll go back to that later.
Oh yeah, and so yeah, it's either reactivity or static, and then I do some switching. I like the wide angle switching stuff usually because we cover the smaller angles in the other stuff like control tracking, for example. And at
Hmm.
the absolute end, sometimes I like to do some kind of a movement. It's a really general structure, but I think it works.
Okay. Okay. I'm building up like
Mhm.
I want people to be able to compare like how I would perhaps build a playlist and how you would play a playlist and sort of like just compare the two. We're using similar scenarios.
Can you give
So
me a second? I grab some
of course,
water.
take
Be
your
right
time.
back. Thank
Hmm.
you.
So chat, that would be a perfect time to, if you have your questions, you want me to ask him, I'll ask him, of course. I'll read through some things as well that we can take. And I'll read through some questions because it's hard to like yap and play and analyze at the same time. How are you guys enjoying the yapping session so far? Hopefully you're learning something because the idea is mainly that we want you to learn, right? You take his approach, you take my approach, you see what works best for you. You sort of grow a seed in you, as I talk about. Just growing ideas, growing this critical thinking is like the most important part I think I could teach you guys. Ray, I'll take Ray's question real quick. I just want to know how to get rid of whiffing / predicting because sometimes I don't trust what I see / aim at. And another question, how to train eyesight on KovaaK to help staying focused in Valorant when it comes onto your screen. Okay, so Ray, your question is super loaded because it could be tracking, it could be clicking. But two things I want you to, to think about, and we talked about this briefly, me and Krascsi. If you're having like a fucking hell, if you're having like a scenario, number one thing I want you to look at, similar to what R was asking about. If you're using purely your peripheral vision, you will flick into a zone anywhere around the target and will lead to this super hard initial flick and then this little micro. But essentially what you're overly relying on your peripheral vision instead of focusing on looking at it and dictating, because ultimately your eyes have to dictate where you should go and you can't sort of like not focus on anything. You should also it's difficult without seeing your aim, but try to find if the issue is your accuracy, your lack of visual confirmations, or your speed. That's just a general answer.
All right, I'm back.
Yo, what's up? You can take this question too because I just answered it and maybe they can get your perspective. It's kind of a wide question, but Ray asks, I just want to know how to get rid of whiffing / predicting because sometimes I don't trust what I see / aim at.
Well, at this, I think whiffing and predicting is really a mental thing. It's not that much about aim. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Uh, it's I what I'm a big fan of is spamming deathmatch or some kind of game mode in your game where you can have a lot of combat
Okay.
just pegged, and that does like multiple things. One is uh, of course you get comfortable with combat, and the other thing is you become less emotionally attached to the outcome of the
Yeah.
combat because it just happens so much. You get sort of desensitized. and that way you build up confidence, and you don't start overthinking or you don't get anxious when you like in combat anymore. And I think whiffing is just being scared of making a mistake.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Uh, I answered his question a little bit, but going off what you said actually clicked something in me. And one thing that I will say, if you're like, you have to look how you consistently whiff. If you're whiffing constantly by overflicking, then maybe that's the issue you need to target. And
Mhm.
if you're constantly whiffing within the micro, then maybe that's it's a combination of both. So look at the
Yes,
consistent patterns. I would say to you, Ray, and
I agree
Krascsi.
actually. Yes.
And Krascsi recommends you to get into game, thug it out, get into like DM, get into work, and also spotting patterns there.
Yeah,
Uh,
because I think even if you it's about the patterns, one side of that is you get better at the range of motion. Let's say, for example, like large flicks or micros, and the other
hmm.
part is again confidence. Like a lot of gaming actually comes down to mindset and how you think about stuff.
Yeah, yeah, very true, very true. Another person had, well, first we'll take this one first. He had how to train eyesight on KovaaK to keep staying focused on Valorant when enemies come to your screen. Do you think eye training is bullshit? Do you think it's real? Do you think it? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Um,
If you have no thoughts, it's completely fine. By the way, like
I
you don't have
actually
to.
do. I experimented with some stuff
Hmm.
before for a few months where I try to up my EPM, try to up my get my reactivity up, like the raw reactivity itself, reaction time, and just processing speed in general. Because with that, your eyes also have to be quicker to follow. But I think if you have, a, like, you're not especially slow, it's usually not what the problem is. I think when some people say that eyesight is the problem, it's the fact that when things don't really change, the human brain kind of just doesn't think about that. Let's say you're holding an angle for 20 seconds. Most people kind of zone out. It's really difficult to stay focused. And when someone picks you, you just say that you got timinged. I mean, I do that sometimes, you
Yeah,
know. But it's just how the human eye and the brain works. That's why I don't know if you're familiar with Stewie 2K
yeah.
from CS.
Smoke
He
criminal.
actually, yeah, he actually had this habit that I was really curious about how he moves his crosshair up and back down every once in a while so his eyes can refocus.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So you're saying essentially that your brain sort of like stops focusing on anything, sort of focuses on just autopiloting, and sort of like it just becomes dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And you
Yes.
have a certain like, I don't want to call it activation period, but a period where you can be a little bit more focused on. And that's sort of what I touched on with Ray is like, I would rather you focus on the crosshair, focus on the target, focus on whatever. Just make sure you're focusing on something rather than not focusing on anything.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, next question. He says, I have a question that you think is it worth, sorry, these questions are formulated weird. Is it worth doing a different sense for KovaaKs and the game you play, like Valorant?
I have thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think you can do the same sensitivity as long as you have all the scenarios that respectively cover all possible ranges of motions that you might have to do in an actual Valorant game. But if you're kind of you don't have the right scenarios, then you can kind of replicate having that repertoire of scenarios by changing your sensitivity, by upping it or lowering it.
Okay. Okay. Do you think that there's people who learn from changing sensitivities, or do you think that everybody should change sensitivities, or you think it's specific, or what's your thoughts on that?
Hmm. Like change in aim trainer compared to game.
Sure, yeah.
Huh. I think it's definitely a good idea to play different sensitivities, not just playing the exact same one all the time in your aim trainer. Think it can expose some of your weaknesses. Let's say you're playing like 60 cm or something in a tech shooter, and I make you play even 40 to play some static. That's like micros. There's a pretty high chance if you never did that before, it won't you won't do that well. But if you get that skill down, you might feel you will probably feel more confident in game with your micros. So there is some sense in I don't know if you're familiar with Aimer 7's stuff when he
Mm-hmm.
talked about like smoothness training and such. Some concepts I think can be borrowed here. Like there is
Okay.
some sense in using variety in settings to highlight mistakes and to practice things that would be really difficult to practice in game.
Okay. And you think that, like, if I practice, as you mentioned, different sensitivities on different fields of static, for example, you think that when I then go into game, that will still be relevant? Because if I understood the terminology correctly, how some people view it is that, hey, if I'm using different sensitivities, I'm using different muscle groups, and I'm using different parts of my brain, or whatever you want to specify it as. And then I would go into my game, and my brain then knows to use, like, what to use at what specific time. Do you think that your brain sort of will automatically fire to be like, hey, use this muscle, use this pattern, use this, whatever it is, because you've trained all of them? Or do you think that's unrelated?
Hmm. Well, I think even if you keep the same sensitivity across everything and you keep practicing with that all the time, it's just so complex. It's not it's not I don't think it's the same as most other like sequence of events that you have to perform exactly the same time. There are just so many variations. Like uh, people could pick you, uh, even if they pick you in the same way in Valorant or CS. If it's a different map or you're further or away or closer to the corner or
Mm-hmm.
something, it's gonna be different.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so you can't really, you need to train some adaptability. It's, I think it's really important.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree with you, because no gunfight is ever the same, essentially. The way I view it is sort of like, I've seen some people, and I could get your take on this. I've seen some people, because a common thing is like, hey, you change your sense, or you change your crosshair, you make a change, right? And you
Yes.
feel amazing. You feel like, holy shit, I found my new sense. I found the new thing. Now I'm going to aim amazingly. And then a couple of games later, a sleep later, a day later, whatever it is, you go back to your same old habits. What I found personally is that those people who end up going back to their habits have, what, how would you say it, are less likely to benefit from a sense change, probably, possibly, because their brain aren't, either they're not there skill wise, or they're not capable of like learning and adapting things quick enough. Whereas a person who, for example, changes sense, and thinks of it as a long term investment, or like he will completely, quote unquote, master this sense. In my experience when coaching people, I found that those people benefit more from sense change? Do you feel like, no, I think because you were sort of more onto like everyone is will benefit from this. Do you think that there's a time and a place for it, or do you think that, as you mentioned, hey, no, everyone should just
Mm.
do this when it's change sensitivities in different scenarios?
So I want to kind of start with addressing why I think people perform better when they change something.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's related to the focus thing again. It forces you
Okay.
to adapt, and I think we were not meant to um, perform the exact same things in the exact same way every single time, as we are also moving through time. So we are not always in the same environment. Um,
Okay.
it's just so many variables
Yeah.
uh, that, yeah. And if you, I think it's the same thing as the crosshair thing. But the other part of this is I like, so people who never change sensitivity, I actually like to ask them to try something different
Mm-hmm.
for few weeks or even months. But people who change every day, I will force them to stay on one thing for some time so they
Yeah.
see like what's the other side
Side.
of the whole thing looks like. Yeah, and
Mm.
then they can kind of make their own conclusion.
Yeah.
What I found is that most people who don't play like every day for like a lot of hours tend to benefit more from sensitivity changes actually than people
Okay.
who play more.
Okay. Okay. So, sort of to summarize, your view, and I think this is really really important for people, is to try both sides and see what fits you. And
Yeah,
I think that's really 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 important, because that's essentially what I do with everything to come to a conclusion, and it's what I recommend everyone do. Instead of waiting for me or Krascsi or anyone else to give you the answer, you should gain both perspectives and try them out, which works best for you.
yes.
Okay, let's try another question here. Okay, this is a good one because we can do this live. When I play reactive, after bot switches directions, I do smooth directions change, but my crosshair stays behind. So essentially, he's flicking back and he's under tracking. And how would you say a person should deal with that? And we can also show live if you'd like.
Mhm. Well, I think one way of dealing with this is I would suggest two solutions to try at first. One is trying something that has blinking um, or dashing and even stopping maybe,
Mm.
or uh, make them play a progression of um, different frequency strafes.
Okay,
So
so
start with something like really slow and long stuff and see exactly when it starts breaking down in a sense. Like when do you start under tracking? So does it
mm,
happen on centering one? If it does, then maybe you should try like an easier version of centering and see if it still
mm.
breaks down there. Or you should try something like thin aiming long and see if it's the strafe frequency that messes up your aim and makes you under track.
Yeah. Yeah, I strongly agree with what you said there at the end, that like set up a playlist where it's like easiest, slightly harder, slightly harder, slightly harder, slightly harder, and see where it breaks. That's a super good analogy to do it. It's also like realizing we talked about this slightly. If you can't track centering one, you probably shouldn't be worried about not being able to track, a hard close fast strafe spot or something like
Yes.
this. So for this person, E is his name. Focus on finding your weaknesses and a little bit easier stuff probably.
I
Okay.
actually saw
Mhm.
seen some one question for sure, but I'm also really curious and I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
what how much do you think someone should play a day? Because I have pretty strong views on this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really curious about yours.
Yeah, I think this is sort of like a thing where it's so individual, but I think a pattern that I see but isn't necessarily true every time is that a person who's a beginner probably needs a little bit more time than somebody who's advanced. And I think the main thing is if you struggle with any form of fatigue, let's say you're playing for 20 minutes and you're just like, you feel tired, you feel exhausted, you feel like you're always autopiloting, then maybe a shorter playlist will be more beneficial to you. But there's techniques to deal with that, right? You can play like a short 10-minute playlist, but you can repeat it like 3 times to like sort of stay active all the time.
Yeah.
So I think the real answer is to play a long playlist, go into game, see how you feel in game. Are you performing worse in game? It could be the length. It may be not the main thing, but it could be. And try a shorter playlist and see how you respond to that. Essentially. Well, what are your thoughts?
Um, Back in the day, I played a lot, like even up to multiple hours a day.
Mm.
And then I decided to try, less, see what happens. And what I found really is that 20 to 40 minutes of actually focused practice uh, is usually enough for most people. I think
Mm.
most people are playing too much.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. So, let's say a beginner comes to you and he's like, hey, I really want to get better at Apex, but also CS, but also Delta Force, but also, I don't know, Fortnite, for example. Those are a lot of different aim fields. How would you fit that into, for example, a 30, 40-minute playlist? Would you hyper focus on the static one week and then hyper focus on something else the other week? Or would you sort of give him a variety essentially to work on everything together?
Yeah, so I would, of course, ask them what's priority. If they are playing like one game as like they are grinding ranked as hard
Mm.
as possible on that one, and they are just chilling in the other ones, and they want some improvement,
Yep.
then I will make it focus, of course, on the main game and stuff. But if they are trying to get better at everything,
Mm-hmm.
the way I like to do it is most of those people, I think, kind of know what they are struggling with because they are playing multiple different games. And at the point when they are coming for coaching, they already have uh, some sense, but they can't really like articulate it. That's kind of
Yeah.
what they need help with. And for those people, I think uh, I like to give them playlists, let's say one that focuses mostly on flicking, one that's on click timing, one that's smooth tracking,
Mm.
kind of like that, and I let them pick. But I make these shorter on purpose. Usually, what I do is I ask them to play each like once a week, let's say, and then the rest is up to them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. A person asks, like, how do you? I'll read his question again. He finds it a hard time implementing habits from KovaaK's in game. For example, he practices deceleration in KovaaK's, but then in game he goes back to flicking full power. And I guess his question is, how do I deal with that in your eyes?
So I think the could have multiple solutions.
Yeah.
One is, of course, just we would have to see if in KovaaK's are they actually making the initial flick fast and then they are decelerating.
Mm.
The other thing is that KovaaK's is a really controlled environment,
Yeah.
and in-game combat is not, and that way they might feel more agitated in a sense to kill a person. And in that case, it's mostly only shoot if your crosshair is on the person when you practice your in-game stuff, like in deathmatch or anything, or even try playing some ranked games where you only shoot when your crosshair is actually on the target. You can still make your fast flick, but don't shoot instantly like it's a reaction thing. Make
Mm.
it conscious, and with time, I think it's gonna become a reflex.
Yeah, yeah. I think what you said there, one thing really stood out to me that I strongly agree with, and I try to explain people is that KovaaK is exactly like you said, a controlled environment where you're isolating specific exercises all the time. And if you're, for example, missing, my take on it is if you're overflicking in game but not overflicking KovaaK, for example, you may look at, hey, how fast am I moving? Am I overflicking when I go larger targets? Is speed is the issue? Do I need to play some reflex scenarios? Do I need to play some pressure scenarios, for example? And look at like, oh, am I overflicking in target switching? Maybe I need to add some target switching to work on those larger raw reactionary flicks and stuff like that, going based off also what Krascsi said is very true. I'll take another question here in a second. Just fine because I got a lot of things. Okay, here's a good one. If I take time off aim training, will I lose all my gains?
Not all. You're not gonna be that fresh. But it's really quick to build it back up.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
say like in a month or two, you can be completely back to the skill level you were before the break.
yeah.
But of course, it's really difficult when it comes to the ego to actually not have those incredibly good scores for some time. And I think that's the part that's like really stopping people. They feel like, oh my God, I got so much worse after a break. I should never take breaks again. It
Yeah,
just, yeah, it just gets horrible. But no, it's completely fine to take breaks. Sometimes when you take a break, you come back and you actually play better
yeah.
in some
That is.
scenarios because things just click over time, even if you're not playing.
Yeah, exactly. You're sure still, and I think this is I relate back to this to my bodybuilding stuff because, and this is where I theorize that muscle memory actually comes in. It's sort of like how quickly you will learn things back up after quote unquote like losing it. You're not really losing it, but let's say you're rusty. And I think that if you've been at like a 10 out of 10 level, hypothetically, and then you stop training and now you're at a 5 out of 10 level, exactly like Krascsi said, you have an easier time to regain that 10 out of 10 level. So you don't have to do all the fundamental work that you did before. You sort of just have to quote unquote refresh your mind, but at a little bit longer period, right? Because if you're at bodybuilding, I frequently, like if I go on vacation, I'll lose a lot of muscle, but then I'll go back for training or a week or two and I'll regain that muscle quite quickly. And I don't have to spend a year to regain that muscle. And I think it's similar with aim training, right?
I think so too. Yes.
Okay. This is sort of similar to that guy, but I think it's important. Is there a way to train your subconscious aim? I feel like when I get caught off guard, my aim goes to shit.
I mean, the only real thing, or I don't know how to explain, that I could assume is you don't expect someone to peak
Yeah.
and then you get caught off guard and then you don't hit your shots.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think to take my view on that question, I think being caught off guard is super important, but it's also to do with if you don't have those patterns and the foundation, that's super important. More specifically, if you have those patterns and those foundations, sort of like a scenario that I'm playing now that surprises you, that's more reflex, that's more pressure, that's doesn't always give you the information, sort of like a window flick blade storm, for example, can be very beneficial because it's sort of like an in-game engagement or a one wall one target where you don't know anything and then boom, the info appears to you and you just react subconsciously. it's almost similar to how you would address a speed clicking or a speed target switching scenario to that degree. So find something that find a scenario that brings out that subconscious aim out of you, essentially. What would be
I
my
agree
take.
with the aim part, but I think the other huge part is playtime and just knowing
Mm,
when people can do certain stuff. Like, yes, hypothetically speaking, you could get such perfect aim that you don't even have to use game sense if you're logged in at 100% at every second of a round in a
mm.
tech shooter game. But if you think about it, let's say like a round is like, I don't know, like a minute, 30 minutes, 40, 2 minutes. Um, you can't focus the 100% for all that much.
No,
It's
that's true.
impossible. You need to pick when you actually lock in, you know. I think that's kind of where these more difficult scenarios can kind of come into play.
Yeah, yeah, very true, very true. I think it's also just to go off that, a super important thing. We sort of touched on it briefly. Is in my eyes, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, variety is super important because, as we talked
Yes.
about, no gunfight is ever the same, even if it's the same angle, the same everything. So you have to sort of, in my opinion, it's you can define mouse control as many things. In my opinion, it's being able to react or quote unquote handle the situation or shoot back accurately, no matter what the enemy or you are doing. Is how I would define. So even if you're like jumping or you're strafing or he's strafing or you have this gun or you have this gun, you're effectively putting shots on target, quote unquote. And
Hmm.
that's where variety is super important, because if you only play micros and then I'm being pressured by an off angle or a wide angle, then you don't know, your brain essentially doesn't have the skill to back that up, which is why it's important to, for example, hit wide targets, then micros, then larger than smaller, or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I also think
Uh,
if you hit like these multiple angles and stuff, um, it's one part of it is it's more in your like up to date repertoire. Uh, it's easier to just bring it out of you in a situation. And the other
mm,
part is if you do it and you do it well in KovaaKs, you will believe that you can actually do it in game too.
yeah.
That's like a huge thing. Like overthinking is killing you so many times, not just in the real life, in game too. That's
Yeah.
what I noticed from like a lot of people's gameplay.
For sure, for sure. Because there's a lot of different personalities you meet when you coach, and a lot of people are very over analytical when perhaps the answer is super simple. You just need more playtime because you're bad, for example. And other people are very unanalytical, and perhaps when they need to be analytical, where they'll do the same mistake over and same mistake over and over again, despite being like, hey, do this, hey, do this, hey, do this, for example. Um, okay, let's find Stimulated. It says, thank you for the stream. Thank you for being here, baby. Um, let's see. Let's read some questions. There's a lot of questions, so I don't want to take like a similar one again. Um, for increases. Surfer is if I reach scroll complete on my I recommend reading to push play complete is the longest. So this is a great thing I can answer one. Ali asks essentially that he's gold and he plays the Voltaic benchmarks, and people are saying, hey, play VDIM, the Voltaic daily method.
Mhm.
But it's too long for him. So I think it's like 1.5 hours or 2 hours or something crazy
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
ridiculous.
It's insane. I'm not sure. Like, I get the structure that they used, and I think the VDIM is actually VDIM 2 specifically is actually pretty good. But it's, in my opinion, a little too wild. What would you tell Ali to do? Should he create his own playlist? Should he remove some scenarios? Should he, what should he do?
Well, um, I would say it's definitely worth playing. You should play a lot of different things, especially when you're starting out. Just stick to them for considerable amount of time, at least 2 full rotations of the whole thing. Maybe you can half every day and just play it through like a 2 week period or something like that to see if you actually like that.
Mm.
And you will probably see that certain scenarios resonate with you better, and then you can maybe pick those out and experiment on your own, making your own version of VDIM.
Mm. And that's where I think that's why I value you as a viewer to learn knowledge more than anything, because if you have the knowledge to change the playlist, it will benefit you more, because every single playlist, no matter how good it is just a generalization of what you need. And if you don't have the knowledge to customize that, like some people are so afraid to like, hey, this scenario is too hard for me in your playlist. Like just search Pasu slow instead of the normal Pasu and just change that out if it's too hard. Like people are so afraid and so unknowledgeable to make those distinctions, right?
I agree. Yes.
One thing I can say though is we touched on this briefly, is figure out if you need a short burst. Maybe you're a little bit beginner if you're on the gold level, but figure out if you need a short burst of effective training, sort of like my FAR 3.0, or you need something a little bit longer, like the VDM, and where you learn, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's really different. I've seen people who learn really good and their brain doesn't turn off for some reason when they do
Yeah.
10 runs of the same exact scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I can do 5 max, and I've seen people who can't do much more than 2 because then they start autopiloting. So it's different for
It's
everyone.
100%, 100%. I agree with that. It's because some people I give a plan to, and it'll be like 2 hours long, and they'll repeat it like 3 or 4 times, like something insane. Like they're just playing nonstop, and I'm like, how the fuck are you even like? How are you not dead? You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
some people are just built different, I guess.
I mean, I had clients that had to uh, instruct to play less because they were playing so much. I knew it was like after like the point of diminishing returns, just
Yeah.
so much. Uh, like a lot of the improvement when it comes to long-term stuff, like actually changing your habits,
Mm-hmm.
happens over quite a long time and during sleep.
Mm.
So of course you can have a nice cue and you can fix something uh, right at that moment, but if you don't keep practicing that, uh, you will go back to your old default setting
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
sense.
Exactly, exactly. One thing I think we didn't cover a lot, and we can actually go back to this. Do you mind if we like just play some? Because we didn't cover tracking whatsoever. Do you mind if we
Mhm.
just go back, look at some tracking scenarios, look at me playing, seeing like, hey, do this, and perhaps per people for the visual learners, right?
Oh yeah, of course we can do that. Yes.
Awesome. So, do you want me to play any specific scenario?
Mm, let's start just whatever, and we will see.
Okay, I'll play Thin Gauntlet, whatever. This one
Okay.
7. I have it in my playlist, so I guess. Not usually not this shaky actually, but whatever. I think that's one thing. I'm down like 3 coffees or something, and I start to shake. But usually I'm not this shaky, whatever whatsoever.
um,
We'll play this one, I guess. Yeah,
yep.
go ahead.
To answer Double's question, how do you decide what is diminishing returns? Yes,
Mm,
it's if after the session, if you perform worse and
yeah.
if you didn't play the session, then it was too much. That's how I
Yes.
like to think about it.
I strongly agree. I strongly agree. If you're that's what I mean with like fatigue sort of. And I don't think fatigue is like in your arm, even though that could be considered fatigue. I think more mental fatigue, where if you go into game and you just suck and you've played like 3 hours, then that's a sign that you should not play 3 hours, right?
Yes.
In terms of my tracking, do you notice anything? Am I just too bad? Am
Um,
I shaky or?
Yeah, yeah, you are shaky, but you also said you're three coffees down, so that's like one
Yeah,
part.
I'm,
But
I'm sort.
also, yeah,
Yeah.
in general, for most people, being shaky is actually not knowing how to utilize their wrist in combination with their arm. And I'm not talking about aiming with both, but actually using your wrist to keep your arm aiming more stable by leveraging friction of the mousepad.
Okay. So how would you say, should you quote unquote activate your wrist more? Should I think about like what should I think about?
The way I like to do it is I ask them to kind of float the wrist when starting out and try
Mm-hmm.
to use arm only. And then they will see what I'm talking about, and it shows in the like the gameplay itself too.
Mm.
Um, and then I ask them to use a little bit more wrist in the sense of uh, dragging it a little bit, you know, and then try
Okay.
pushing it more into the pad and see what happens. And I ask them to do that on different scenarios. And people usually get what I mean. It's like if something is closer to you and a bigger target, you can't drag your wrist. You're just making it incredibly slow for yourself to react to some huge movement. You need your arm. But when something is further away and you want to get basically free precision in a sense, you can put your wrist more into the pad. And even something that most people don't think about is on cloth pad. The reason my cloth pads are really interesting is you can even push the mouse into the pad, and you already do that most likely. Just you're not aware of it, and you could even get a feeling for during practice, like what you do and how tweaking that changes how you aim.
Mm. Okay. Okay. So when somebody comes to me with very shaky aim, for example, I tend to do the approach we talked about a little bit earlier, where you go from a very easy scenario, and that's sort of will because if you play a very easy scenario, you'll feel like your hand will smoothen out a little bit, and you'll be more relaxed, and that will set up the parameters for the next scenario essentially. And
Mhm.
like if I was to like coach myself in this specific moment, I would be like use a slightly easier version or slightly easier whatever. But your approach is like activating different parts of your arm. Is that correct?
Yeah, usually I don't like to jump difficulty first.
Mm,
Um, Unless it's like I can just see that it's way too difficult, like they are getting
yeah.
sub 20% accuracy, then it's like no point playing.
Yeah.
But the first thing is usually trying to have them figure out like how to actually track, because it's something I really had to learn. I was a CS player.
Mm,
I didn't know much about tracking, so I had to figure all of it out. And well, I'm not a really good tracking player at all. Um,
yeah.
but I got like Grandmaster complete last season or maybe the season before that. I don't remember. So like I'm decent. Uh, I attribute my fast progress on tracking because it was horrible to just making myself suffer on the Skypad on like 25 cm
Yeah.
and just rigorously playing and analyzing and iterating and seeing why I'm doing bad. Also, I checked out like the top players of the time, like what are they doing? How do they do that? Why does my crosshair not move like that? What could they be doing with their arms? Can I replicate
Yeah.
that movement? Like, for example, when I'm watching someone coach, I can kind of see or feel myself if I'm really focused. I can feel myself like actually how their like as if I was them, how their hands are moving.
Yeah, I feel you. So it's sort of like you're feeling out how he would move and replicating it, and then seeing
Yes.
how to. Yeah, I think that's super cool. That's it's sort of like a boxer imagining how would this guy throw a punch and then doing it, which is very interesting. One thing I want to discuss. Do you see anything with my aim, for example, any initial thoughts for people that, are watching and maybe see like, hey, I have this same mistakes that this guy is doing?
I would try to do less wrist, focus more on arm.
Focus more on arm. Okay.
When it's like this small, you can leverage wrist more and fingers, obviously. But when it's like a bigger target, then you should rely more on arm. That's what I noticed that most people like. If you look at most popular scenarios in KovaaK, I think at least when I actually look through most things, um, you can kind of wrist aim most of them. And I think uh, most people's biggest mistake is just not being able to use their arms,
Okay.
even for really simple things. Just tracking centering with basically your wrist locked. It's just most people shake like crazy.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. So I tend to not be super like mechanical folks, meaning like this the arm and how you move and stuff like this. I tend to be more like, hey, if you're doing this mistake, I'm going to give you this scenario. Do you think that there's a balance for that, or do you think that it's always like it's primarily your arm and then the scenario, or it's primarily your scenario and then the arm?
Ooh, I think it's they feed into each other. Uh, I think for some people can do just fine with getting a new scenario to play, and then they will figure it out. But most people, well, at least most of my recent clients, I think, never, never really think about these small things because, like, why would you?
Yeah,
Like when I mentioned these, like I think like 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 times they are like, oh, so you can do that too, you know.
yeah,
It's kind of like that.
I
So
hear
I
you.
think the kind of like the mechanical part is really important, and in that case I kind of use the scenario as a tool.
Okay. Okay. So for me, when my tracking, I should use my arm more. You think? Is there anything else you see? Like I don't know, under tracking. I'm not precise enough. I'm not smooth enough. Like, what are some generalizations you see? If you want, I'll replay a specific scenario for you.
Hmm. Could we check ground plaza Sparky V3 OW? I think that's the name.
Hmm. The full one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, of course.
I really like this one. It has a bit of everything.
Yeah. I don't think I ever played this one. Do you feel like this Overwatch one, where there's less acceleration between the switch and the target, is better for training reactive?
I think it's training a slightly different reactive because when it accelerates and decelerates, you kind of train some kind of a reading tool. Um, so it kind of makes you rely on the acceleration and deceleration. You need to shake it up a little bit sometimes with instant acceleration. So
Hmm.
you don't rely all the time on just that. And vice versa, people who play only like the Overwatch kind of stuff, um, uh, actually the reading usually is worse on their aim looks worse on non-Overwatch stuff than on Overwatch stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
What sense are you using?
I think 33.
That's pretty good.
That was a good one. I like this one.
It's interesting because the close range stuff look way better.
I will say when I started KovaaKs, I would spam the fuck out of close fast range. So I think that's my that's my strength, but I don't do that anymore. But yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
it looks way better there. I think it's I know it's like your first time playing this one, but it kind of felt like it was the same thing on the other tracking stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
It's your the way I can explain it is kind of like a um uh polling rate.
Okay,
Um So your brain is
I
kind
hear
of
you.
polling like, yeah, and then, oh, will it change direction? No, it didn't. I'm gonna keep tracking this in this direction. And you just keep doing this same loop. And if it does change direction, it's like an as if kind of thing, but looped. If it does change, you do the switch. And you do that like a lot of times per second, probably.
Okay,
And
so
it makes you not like unable to appreciate the long strafes. You're still stressed when the bot is doing a longer strafe, when
okay,
you should be way calmer and way smoother. You should keep your resources for when it's actually doing the direction change. It should
okay.
be more reactive in a sense and not just always anticipating.
Okay, okay, I got you. So I need to be a little bit smoother. And if you can see my stream, because I see this also in people, is that essentially they're almost flicking back to the target, but like constantly. And that's what I think you mean with the polling rate issue, where they're like
Mhm.
doing small static flicks back to the target all the time, almost.
Yes, and even
Mm,
the long strafes can look like that for a lot of people,
okay, I'll
and I
try a
think that's the
run.
problem. Okay.
I'll try a run, and I'll try to be more smoother, essentially. So one thing I'll ask you is that I feel like I used to play a shit ton of reactive. Like that was the main thing that I would play all the
Mhm.
time. And I felt like it didn't benefit me as much as playing smoothness. Do you think in game what I mean? Do you
Mhm.
think that that is true, or do you think that that's just something relevant to me, or yeah, just general thoughts about reactive, I
Oh
guess.
no, it is definitely true. You can kind of be reactive, like think there's this voltaic scenario that's like um the Aether one. It
Okay.
really feels like it's checking for raw reactivity in a sense.
Hmm.
Like that uh after a certain point is not as beneficial as smoothness, but most people should at first focus on just being able to get 50%, I would say, at least on a centering one.
Okay. And do you think when do you think is appropriate time for people to start using like close long strafes for like a dodge reactive scenario?
But do you mean like you're moving or just the bot being more evasive?
And no, I'm moving as well, like a movement scenario.
Ah, actually, there was this aimer guide that I'm referring to again, I think, about his movement stuff. Starting with really simple things like horizontal bounce dodge, I think, and these kind of things. I think you can start right away, just with the
Okay.
really easy stuff. But a bot is basically there's one pull long dodge two, that it's like static basically, and you have to move and you have to feel like how to um, move your mouse compared to your movement, to just compensate for that. And also some stuff where the strafe is just always the same, and you
Hmm.
just try to get used to it
Yeah.
with your movement and your mouse. And then you can do rhombus dodge, where it's doing some back and forth too, so
Hmm.
the angles feel different. And then you can just try like a simple AGC3 or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I feel so. Your answer is essentially that you can start right from the get go, and you can just scale it to be a little easier, essentially.
Yes, but it's I would say it's really important that you um, either read the guide or watch some really good high score on it, so you get a sense for how to move.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good thing. That's a real popular thing that I see with usually high skilled players will cheese the movement scenarios more, and low skilled scenario people will just be unsure how to move. For most people, personally, I recommend anti-mirroring. But how do you recommend a person move? Should he just move the way he moves in game? Should you do short strafes, very long strafes, mirror, anti-mirror, or anything else you find?
Well, I'm no expert when it comes to um, movement. What I found working for myself and for most people I work with is I I try to teach them some kind of strafe aiming. By that I mean utilizing your keyboard to kind of, I guess you could say, cheese the movement scenarios. So if you're in close range combat, for example, and someone is doing some long strafe on you, you don't have to do an anti-mirror and just do a 360 on your mousepad. You could just, maybe, if your health is like that relative to that guy's, and like, there's a lot of things to this, but you could just mirror him maybe.
Okay,
So
so
in KovaaK
it's
in general, I also like to, um, I like the dedicated practice to mirroring and anti-mirroring. And for more complex stuff, I would say anti-mirror the short strafes and mirror the longer ones.
Jesus.
Um, because on the short strafes, if you try to mirror them, the delay of your movement, like the brain and stuff, and then you having to make the small mouse corrections, that adds up, and you lose the whole thing. But while anti-mirroring something, doing short strafes, it's way easier because it's more, I would say, you have to do bigger mouse movement, and when you have to do reactive, it's easier to do larger reactive movements than smaller ones. And also you can
Okay.
kind of compensate for the delay on the keyboard by your aim. By mirroring, doing that is basically uh, impossible on short strafes. But long strafes, anti-mirroring looks kind of cool in like clips and stuff, but I found mirroring in most cases, for most people, that it's just harder to play against.
Hmm.
Like, I remember I watched a lot of Apex clips on Twitter, and most of them were just like anti-mirroring, you
Yeah.
know. But mirroring is also like pretty powerful. Of course, you have all these strategies and everything, like how much HP you have, what angles you're in, what angle the enemy's
Hmm.
in, how they are, where they are looking, and all that stuff. It's
S-
quite
s-
complex, but I would say like Quake players could talk about that like way more detail.
s-
But when it comes to the fundamentals, I think you can learn the most basics in KovaaK, definitely,
hmm.
in a controlled environment.
So essentially, you're sort of saying it's circumstantial, but you prefer mirroring, essentially, when it's when
Uh,
it's when it's when it's possible.
when it's long strafes, yes, I like
Hmm.
mirroring way more. When it's short
Okay.
strafes, I like anti-mirroring more. I find it way more accurate.
Okay. I got you.
I hit more, yeah.
I got you. Got you. And I also want to ask you this, just bouncing off that question because you mentioned Quake.
Mhm.
Uh, People who have naturally really good aim, often I found like these people come from CS or Quake. Like that's just
Mhm.
so, it's not always, but like it's quite common. What about those games, if anything, do you think stands out to quote unquote learn aim in comparison to something else? And do you think it's just based off, hey, this person is just good and he happens to play Quake and that's how he learned, or what do you think?
Well, I would say maybe Overwatch when they are playing hitscan DPS, that's also another one. But in general, I do agree. I think Quake has so many different weapons um,
Hmm.
that you get exposed to quite the variety actually. You have to learn different strategies or tactics, how to use each well. Um, and of course, you're punished by like people with $15,000 if you fuck up.
Yeah.
So like it's kind of demotivating as well. But
Yeah.
it's really good. Like, and also CS, I think it's because since quite the early days we had workshop maps and we could train aim
Yeah.
in there. Like I played a fuck ton of stuff in
Aimbots.
CS. Yeah.
I fucking love
And
aimbots.
yeah. And the stuff where it's like um some target, like you can set how far away you are and how many targets, and you
Mm.
try to play for time, you try to play for accuracy, like all that stuff, and sometimes some tracking stuff too. Like we had a lot of options there.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. What's a per like? Because so many people come to me and they're like, "Hey, I have 80th percentile, so I'm better than 80% of the people," which may technically be true, but it's not really a clean run if it's even in the 90th percentile. It probably looks pretty bad. What's your response to people who overly look for percentile, and is there a percentile you should aim for when you know that, hey, I'm good with this scenario?
The thing is, that's not a good way of looking at it
Mm,
at all. Like if you think about it, some people, like not every not all the same people play all the same scenarios, so you can directly compare yourself to everyone else. Also, the sample size is just not big enough on the less popular scenarios. I don't think it's a good idea to just rely on percentiles only, because it doesn't give you the full picture. And also, you have to count into the whole thing that maybe some people actually grinded that scenario for hundreds of hours,
yeah.
but on other stuff maybe they had one play, like when they were
Mm,
like drunk and played like Piscean
yeah.
360. Like
Exactly.
it's not a good way of looking at it. It's more like it's really difficult. I've been trying to make a formal way of actually deciding on scores where you could say you're proficient uh, on a certain scenario, but it's really complicated.
Mm, okay.
You try to like make it into numbers, but when you look at it from intuition, I think it's quite simple to tell.
Okay. Okay. Um, my take on it is I agree that it's a bad metric and it's not something. It's there's so much variables going into the play into that metric, so I don't think you should use it. Um, I think that you should more so look on how many, like if you get a 99 percentile run but you're shaking all the time, it may indicate that, hey, yes, you're hitting the bot but it looks so unclean. You should focus on fixing your shakiness rather than being proud of your 90th percentile, essentially.
Yeah. The way I like to think about it is try to get the best core you can
Mm?
while staying lazy.
Mm.
Don't do a lot of extra stuff. Actually, when it comes to flicking and all those things, most of the highlights and everything, people do those big flicks and it's so fast and everything, and people want to do the fancy stuff here again.
Yeah.
But that's not like that happens like, I don't know, once every 10 times if your crosshair placement is decent.
Yeah,
So like
exactly.
it's not a
I
good
mean,
way of looking at it.
you can look exactly at the scenario I'm playing right now, and it's super good. It's a super slow moving target. It's very predictable. It's large. It's blah blah blah, and I'm still shaking, right? And perhaps that's the coffee in me, but regardless, I'm still shaking. So should I really go and play the hardest close fast strafes version, or should I, work on a little bit more of these basic stuffs and get this part really, really down? Is what you should question yourself.
Yeah.
A person,
And
because yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
and if you don't really feel like um, the current scenario is not really forcing you to be better, then you can do something slightly more difficult. Yeah,
I agree. I like a huge thing I like to do is to either give the person a easier scenario before and then the normal one, or a harder version before and then the easier one, depending on their needs. If they're lacking precision, if they're lacking smoothness, blah 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 blah. And that's something that I have seen good results with. And I
same.
that's it's sort of like, because I'm gonna do a video about what's it called? What's that playlist called? We just talked about it, the
Hmm.
Voltaic daily thing. Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm going to do a video about that one, comparing it to mine. And one thing that Vdium does really good is conditioning. So it'll give you like a large target, a small target, an easier target, a harder target, and then you're playing your actual scenario. And that is what makes the playlist unique. It also uses a lot of like assisting scenarios to like, so it works like short strafes, long strafes, mid strafes, and then gives you the actual scenario. So you have the full spectrum. It does work on like assisting skills and conditioning. So I think that's something that is good for an issue like that.
I agree. I agree.
Uh,
It's kind of
the,
like swinging out. It's similar to how I think like I I'm quite into AI and stuff.
mhm.
It's how I think it's similar to how um I'm I don't know properly all the math and stuff, but how machine learnings, like the deep learning models, kind of work, like trying to find the local minimum. They have to swing, you know, from like one extreme to the other, and then they start converging to the point where it's like optimal. And I think that's
Mm,
exactly what these conditioning structure does.
exactly. I agree with that. And one thing, just bouncing off that a technique just randomly that I thought of that is super relevant to what you just said is in terms of speed, where some people will overly push speed or underly push speed. And I think that the best way, I mentioned this in some videos at some point, the best way is to essentially, in my opinion, push speed as hard as you can and just slowly taper it down, slowly until you sort of find a balance where, hey, I'm not doing too many mistakes, but at the same time, I'm pushing
Yeah.
myself. I want to take this question because we may have varying opinions, and I think that's
Oh, let's
exactly
see.
what I want. Aren't the benches then the best relative way to measure proficiency in the standardized way? So he's asking, like, are benches the best way to measure proficiency, essentially?
Well, when it comes to what we have available for us, I have to answer yes. Um, because the most ideal way is just impossible to enforce and to make it like functioning, where everybody plays everything the same amount of time and you take all of that into account and calculate some kind of a score as a representation of skill. But also when it comes to benchmarks, of course a high score can indicate that someone is a good player, but it does, like, there's this conversation between high scores and averages, or at least like moving averages, you know.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to just high scores, you could hit maybe like a rank above your usual score if you were really logged in and lucky. That doesn't mean that you're consistently that much better
Yeah,
than all the other people whose scores are calculated based on those high scores. Because yeah, it also depends on the discrepancy between your average performance and your high score and other people's, and you would have to take that into account as well. So it's basically impossible. But when it comes to available tools, yes, I think it is the best.
okay, yeah, because similar, I think this was what you meant, is that, like, we talked about it a little bit earlier, is that some person will, have a good spawn, he'll have a good day of aiming for whatever reason. Maybe he, like, I don't know, snorted 100 milligrams of coffee and now he's good, golden, whatever it is, or he spammed the city 100 times and then got the score. And that will sort of raise the metric to what it should be. Because in my opinion, I think benchmarks don't represent good aim. I think good aim represents good benchmarks. So essentially, like if you have good aim, you will then earn the score that you should have, not that you should spam the benchmark until you quote unquote feel that you have good aim. So it's like not reaching. If you reach this rank, it doesn't mean that you have good aim. But if you hop on your benchmark every now and then you reach your said rank, that would more imply that you have good aim because it's just an indirect result.
Yeah, I think I see it. It's like one way in one case it's more complete, more generalized, and the other is way more specialized and way more focused in a sense, where it's
Mm.
like it can be questioned if that same person would perform similarly on other tasks as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Let's take some questions, perhaps. Just stop this shit. Quick question. What could one who struggles to blend arm muscles when aiming, i.e., using wrist and arm, do in order to improve the sync between the two? So, how do you sync your arm and your wrist muscles? Which is a very interesting question.
Actually, it's kind of the same uh, solution, but applied to different things. It's like you should have some scenario like the 90-degree centering ones, where you basically do wrist only, and I have something that's like 180 centering, like no strafes, and you force using arm only, like kind of locking your wrist, and then you kind of transition into scenarios that are still smoothness but have a slightly like higher frequency of strafes, and then you still try to I would say use mostly arm, basically try to lock your wrist and see how it feels, and you will probably get to a point where just the arm is not fast enough, and that's where you should start blending in the wrist. I think that's like the good like general direction to start off of.
Okay, interesting. Um, I'll take this question because I thought it was pretty good. Um, how can someone improve flicking on a moving target, then smoothly track it after the flick lands on it? I'll answer this one and then you can answer it just to change things up.
Mhm.
In my opinion, the first thing you need to do is check like, hey, do I even have good smoothness tracking? Is my smoothness even good? Because if your smoothness is horrible, but then hypothetically your flicking is good, then there's a discorrelation in the skill level. Secondly, you can definitely try some region scenarios are really good against this, and also something like smoothbot ts, for example, where it forces you to flick and then smoothly track. I personally think evasive target switching isn't super beneficial for in-game stuff, but I much prefer flicking and then smoothly tracking. But it does come, like, you have to make sure first of all that you can flick accurately and you can flick smoothly and you can also track decently well. Like, if you cannot even flick properly when it's like a vox, or track properly when it's a vox ts scenario, then the vox ts thing is what you should be working on. And also, if you're over flicking all the time, it's going to lead to a longer ttk. What do you think, Krascsi?
I think stuff like thumb target switch, and like there's this scenario that I really like. It's called thin control raspberry. These kind of
Mm.
stuff are amazing for this exact thing.
True. Tam Smooth is goated. And and that's what I mean with like flicking and then linear tracking and
Yes,
also regen.
exactly. Yeah,
Super good. Thin control is also sort of like a centering, but it does blinks, correct? It's like a
yeah,
different patterns, I
yeah.
think. It's sort of like
It's
Thin
also
Gauntlet.
region.
It's also regen. Oh, okay.
So that's why it's like it really punishes you for not being smooth.
Yeah. I see it. I know what you mean. Okay, let's see, think about something else. Oh, also, let's take this. Where can people reach out to you if they want your coaching, for example, or just get in touch to you? Do you want your YouTube channel, your everything. You could also link, and I'll link it in the thingy.
The what I check quite often for this reason is my Twitter, actually.
Mm,
I just send it, I don't know, to you on Discord.
awesome,
It's just
awesome.
at Krascsi, Krascsy.
Yes.
That's where you can DM me. It's the setting is on so that anyone can DM me, not just verified people, if they want to reach out about coaching or just have any questions.
Yeah, yeah,
If I have time, I'm down to answer anything, of course.
yeah. So definitely check Krascsi out if you're want to be coached, or you just like the way he thinks, or anything similar. Um, do you have anything you would like to add? Anything you would like to cover?
This question from Doubles is really interesting. He's been suggesting good questions.
Yeah, he's
Um,
actually a student of mine, funnily enough.
yeah, he's good, he's good. This about how do I decide or how do you decide whether a scenario is too hard and you should move down accuracy threshold and such. I actually made a set of tracking scenarios uh, for which the idea was that you start at there's like 7 levels of difficulty and you have to hit certain accuracy targets to kind of go to the next level. Like I edited Angelic 4 Voltaic, yeah, and I made a version where it's like pretty easy to hit like 95% plus accuracy, but you still
Mm,
have to get like really good fundamentals. And once you have that, you can have a slightly smaller version and maybe slightly faster, where you have to hit 90, 80, 70, 60, 50. And there was one where if you hit like 40 plus, you're already pretty damn good. But I think if you hit accuracy under 25% on any tracking scenario, it's probably way too difficult.
mm. Do you typically recommend people like to have a higher accuracy in tracking, or like what's the accuracy percentage you think people should aim for in like centering or a smoothness, scenario, for example?
Oh, it's really scenario specific, really. But what I found is for stuff that requires both smoothness and reactivity,
Mm-hmm.
a good threshold to tell if a scenario is like hard enough and it still gives you good stuff, but not too easy, is around 40%, like what you're doing actually right now. It means you could push this, like, I think quite a bit if you really focused on this one. But it's not like you would probably gain something out of it with like relatively little effort.
Mm.
But I'm pretty sure it would be beneficial.
Okay.
But of course,
Okay.
it's very scenario specific, so it's really
Yeah.
difficult to tell. It's mostly like shows when, or maybe you can look at the scores, and when the scores are not really changing for multiple days or even weeks, you're really plateaued. You should try an easier version and progress on that until you hit a plateau again, and then revisit the original scenario and see if anything changed.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. So that's really interesting. Hold on, let me just finish this scenario, then I'll run through. I had some notes and some things, some questions I wanted to ask, so
Okay.
I'll just double check when I finish this scenario. Okay. Um, oh, this is a really interesting one. Um, I have a couple one actually. We'll start with this one. What are your thoughts on natural talent? Do you think that genetics play a part in aim training? Do you think that that's bullshit, or do you think that nobody has natural talent when it comes to aim, or just general thoughts?
Of course, general like natural talent does exist. It would be just dumb to deny. Um,
Yeah.
like it. some people just learn faster. Some people have a nervous system that allows them to uh, react faster. Just their brain puts patterns together easier. It does
Mm,
exist,
yeah.
but yeah, and I also think that if like there are some people who even if they do spend thousands of hours, they probably won't get into the top 1%.
Yeah.
Even if
Yeah.
they try their whole lives, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
It's like this in everything. You need some affinity, and then you also have to probably like work quite a bit on it to be at the top.
Yeah.
Like you have to be quite obsessive in
Very
most
true.
cases.
Very true. And as we talked about earlier, that obsession is also partly like you have to also be analytical in that obsession. So just putting in the work won't guarantee you result, but actually like figuring out, hey, I'm doing this. How do I fix that? Hey, this is happening. Am I approaching it correctly? And blah blah blah. And being more aware of your mistakes are really really important because yeah, I mean it's pretty obvious why.
Yeah, I think that's the tool for most people to get like pretty damn good. But of course, there are freaks who will just play and they will just crush most other people.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
exist.
exactly,
Like
exactly.
it's what it is.
It is what
That's
it
why I
is.
think like you should. Of course, sometimes you have to compare yourself to others, but in general, you should mostly look at how you're doing compared to how you were doing in the past.
Mm,
That's the most important part. I know it's a really like general advice, but it comparison they say is the thief of joy, and
mm,
it really it can really mess with someone's mental when it comes to improving and stuff. It's just kind of toxic, I think. But of course, sometimes you do have to check so you have a realistic view of yourself, like where you're at.
yeah. Yeah, that's where exactly like you mentioned. I think it's super good to compare your VODs with like a top 100, top 1% run or whatever, and just sometimes sort of like the inner game of tennis where you visually learn to spot differences rather than because some people just learn like that, and we could sit here and explain a mechanic 1,000 times, but you just seeing it will sometimes be more beneficial, right? Okay, next question. Do you think there's one mistake that you see super commonly in like 80% of the people?
Yeah, not using their arms properly, just relying on wrist overly, and then that just leads to either injuries or like not smooth enough aim, a lot of fatigue.
Okay, interesting, interesting. For me personally, it would be like a lot of people, I feel like, have a discorrelation between speed or accuracy where they'll either sort of like you mentioned with me, where you're flicking super fast, flicking into a zone around the target, recurring slowly, or you're like overly, you're inaccurate when it goes to when it's larger targets or something like that would be the main thing. That's an issue that is something that I see frequently, essentially.
Mhm.
Um, we covered this. We covered this. We covered this. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. It's the most common to. I think we indirectly cover everything.
Oh, it's cool.
Yeah, because I had a bunch of questions, but I think also the chat helped us answer a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Actually, one more thing I've seen in chat that's like really interesting, I think,
mhm,
is from Zach. It's about dancing during a challenging scenario. Is it natural?
mm,
Actually, if you want to do peak performance for a short period of time, you will probably tense quite a bit.
yeah,
Uh, allows for faster reactions on the really short term, like a short time window. But if you stay tense for like a minute or two or three, you're really gonna fatigue yourself, and your reactions will be slower. It's like when you see um, martial artists punch, uh, striking, they are quite relaxed, and then they contract really quickly, and then they relax again.
Yeah.
It should be the same thing here. You can't just keep your tension at a really high level constantly. That way, your movement is gonna look choppy and slow and just so inefficient. That's the kind of the art of aiming, when you can kind of relax and when you have to really uh, tense up for some motions.
Yeah. Like for me personally, I think a really good example is if you're playing, for example, reactive tracking, you're I don't like to give people to be like, hey, you should consciously think about when to tense and when not to tense. I think that's too far for me personally. I just think that people should be aware that, hey, the reactive part, you should react, and then the smooth part, you should try to be smooth, essentially.
Yes,
And blending those two together is essentially, I believe, what Krascsi is talking about.
yes,
Is what will make the entire pattern look smoother.
exactly. Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the thing I found interesting, and I was curious about your viewpoint too. So yeah,
Yeah. I think a lot of the more I talk to different aimers, the more I realize that everyone is almost at a similar direction, similar points, similar things. It's just that people use different terminologies at times, and it's kind of
yes,
explaining us. They're thinking about it the same way, but they're some people are like, no, it's this terminology, but it's almost the same thing, which you're talking about.
yeah, exactly. Like when it comes to discussion, it's really important to try to understand what people mean when
Yeah.
they use different terminologies. Because as you said, that's kind of the same feeling I had when I was more active, that everybody's getting kind of to the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
slightly from different approaches, but they
Mm.
word it usually really differently. And sometimes some terminologies get really picked up or they become really controversial and such,
Yeah.
because there's no like one institution that's like formalizing all of aim training into,
Yeah.
definitions and such. But yeah, I noticed the exact same thing.
Yeah, because I think like a huge thing with the AIM community is that it's exactly like you said. It's a little too they're a little too afraid of letting go of their thoughts, their wording, their analogies. I'm personally like, if you show me something that, hey, this works better, then I'm going to immediately adapt that. And I feel like some people are a little bit more close minded. Some people are a little bit more like, how do you explain it in a polite way?
Oh yeah,
Um,
that
uh,
might
uh,
very well be the case.
yeah.
I'm not, I don't know, but you
Mhm.
talk to, you're way more active in the space. You talk to more people or see more
Uh,
people's
uh,
opinions and such. So it's probably right, because it's also true in most other fields as well. So it would be very weird if it wasn't true in aim training specifically, like
yeah.
the community itself.
Well, well, the thing is, like, the thing that blows my mind is that, let's say you're talking about bodybuilding, for example. Okay, it's bodybuilding is being more and more studied, and it is very studied because people are very interested in it.
Yes.
And that's the amount of studies, the amount of people will standardize things a lot more. But even to that standard, there's things that are right, there's things that's wrong, there's things that you're learning, there's things that you're changing, right? And there's
Yes.
really no one way to work out. But people talk about aim training, which is such a new field and such a small field, as if this is the only way, this is the standard way, everything else is garbage, essentially. And I
Yeah.
think that approach is just wrong.
I mean, it's just how in-group, out-group psychology works.
Mm,
It's way easier to just be dogmatic in this sense, like you have one way and you always kind of repeat that way, and you show the people that yeah, that's how it is, and you kind of like criticize every other way. so you keep yours the way. And
Yeah, yeah.
like it's natural, but it does limit how quickly the field could
Gross.
advance. Yes.
I strongly agree. And this is where I want to get your perspective on actually, because I've never been in like an AIM group. I've never been really super interested in it. I just feel like it's not my thing. Whatever. Uh, you've been in an AIM group, correct? You've been in Voltaic
Yes, I was also in Pure G as well.
and Pure. Do you notice a different mentality? Do you notice exactly like you said, a group mentality? I wanted to ask this like, one person says you should focus on smoothness, and then someone else is like, I'm not sure, but yeah, and then they all sort of jump on that trend? Or do you think that it's different per aim group, it's different per person, or what are your thoughts and experiences about being in an aim group?
Ooh, actually, when we were working on projects together, like routines and testing and new scenarios and stuff, I really enjoyed that. Uh, it was not like the creators I worked with, um, they were very open-minded.
Hmm,
Uh,
that's good.
it was really easy um, to get the pros and cons of different stuff from different
Hmm,
perspectives. So, for example, I could talk to people who are way better at tracking than me about tracking, or like static or dynamic, and we could kind of um, make our ideas like, clash
known.
them
Yeah.
a
Okay.
little bit. Yeah, and then we could come to conclusions. But of course, there were projects where it was I did, for example, that were mostly just me doing a whole set of routines where it was not that collaborative.
Hmm.
I don't think it's so. What has to be understood is there's this part of a name group, and there's another part which turns them into a business of some sort,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And obviously,
Exactly.
with a business comes rules and everything, which has to be kept for contracts and everything. And that's where it's really difficult to lead people who are trying to advance the field in a way where it can still satisfy business requirements.
I feel you. I feel you. I understand.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like what you talked with before, that hey, we've said that you should play speed, and now we're saying hey, play accuracy, and that confuses the customer and the target group that we're trying to attack, and that may create divide and blah blah blah. So you're sort of saying like, no, we're going to stick to just saying play speed, and that will sort of become standardized over time and become quote unquote our approach.
Oh, yeah, yeah, of course. Like, if you want to reach a wide audience, you have to simplify things down as much as possible and make it as standardized as possible. So
Mm,
they don't have to think that much, you know.
yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like a huge barrier. Um, if you want to reach out of people, you need to lower the barrier to understand.
Yeah. Yeah, for
And that's
sure.
just a tactic. And there are, of course, other people, or I don't know. I'm not that involved in communities
Hmm.
anymore at all, really. But I'm pretty sure there are groups that exist mostly to just clash ideas or
Yeah.
discuss stuff, and to just really live for uh, the love of the game
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
real like ties to rules and business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I think those are the more interesting groups for me personally, just because it's a little bit more maybe what I do.
Yeah.
But I wanna address this. I want to address Double's take, and I want your take as well. He essentially says that Voltaic, or larger organizations like Voltaic, they work on standardizing many aspects of quote unquote science, so to speak. I personally think it's, regardless of whatever aim group it is, I think you should be careful to standardize things a little bit too early. And I think you should be careful about using the word science, because even if you have done like a study, even if there's like 10 studies, it's really not, it's almost not enough, because many studies are completely flawed. Like, let's say I am a person who wants everybody to push speed, and I will fund a student who is going to quote unquote find the discovery and make it favorable to play speed, then that's the result I'm going to put out. So studies in general should, in my opinion, be taken as a grain of salt, specifically for aim training, because it's super new, and there's no real money in it yet in the same way that it is for, like, if you want to sell a supplement or something like that. What's your
Yeah.
take on science in aim training?
So I'm not that up to date with what they are doing right now, but I
And not
do
me either,
get
actually.
that it's they are of course everybody. So formalization through reasoning and proving things uh, with actual logic and evidence and everything. I think that's an amazing thing,
Mm,
because that means we can build on other people's stuff. Right now, if this ever becomes a huge thing, this has to be done.
yeah.
And I think, yes, it's nice if they are doing this, but the problem, at least what I found, is i- i- intuitively you can get that this in this situation does this, right? But actually reasoning through the whole thing so that it's undeniable, that part is incredibly difficult. And
Yeah.
let's say you can do that, simplifying that into just like a decision tree or something is also incredibly difficult. So
Yeah.
without proper numbers, a lot of data, I think completely formalizing the whole thing uh, just based on intuition seems kind of like a vain effort or something.
Yeah, yeah. It essentially, I agree with that. It's a little too early, essentially, and you need to give it a little bit more time, more data, as you said, more research, more people to do and experiment until you formalize things exactly. But I think it's one of those things that will never really be formalized. I mean, some things are already sort of formalized, but I think sort of like bodybuilding, where it's so many different variables. Like, one person learns more from lightweight, another person learns more from heavyweight, another person learns slow, fast, this, that. You know what I mean? It's very different for the body, and I think that's true when it comes to aim training, that people learn so different, so it's hard to standardize.
Exactly. Like I wanted to write a whole kind of book on aim training, because when it comes to working with a client, I usually know what I'm doing. As we talked about, sometimes I'm not right about the problem or the scenario I'm suggesting, and then of
Hmm.
course we're adjusting that.
Yeah.
But just formalizing the whole thing, I just started writing like every day about one thing or another thing, and then I was like, yeah, but this ties into this, and that ties into that, and just
Yeah.
making the whole thing make sense. It's hell. I've been struggling with it for like 2 years. It's just
Yeah.
so difficult.
Well, I think the approach is really to find, let's say, 10 people who have overflicking issues, and separate those 10 people into five groups. Five people that have speed issues and five people that don't have speed issues, and like give them two different approaches, and sort of like that. So you sort of have to get a group with this set of patterns, this set of style, this set of issues, and then try to formalize that rather than try to formalize all of aim training as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you have to first start from the smaller building blocks, but first, even those have to be defined and then
Yeah,
just formalized and proved and everything. Of
yeah,
course, we would have to use like deductive approaches, like studies maybe and stuff, but those are really difficult to actually draw like valuable conclusions from, as you mentioned. I think the way to do something is combining that, but with a more inductive approach, trying to think of the whole stuff from first principles, like combinations of those first principles, if that makes sense.
no, it makes sense. I hear you.
Yeah,
I hear you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I want to say one thing about aim groups, and I want to get your point because I want to get the insider perspective. I think scenario creators, I'm not a scenario creator, but I think scenario creators are so underappreciated. And I
Yes.
feel like they have to understand aim at a deeper level because they have to understand how people move, how people react to that, and blah 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 blah. And I think they get super underthanked, or it's easy to see somebody with really good scores and go to him immediately, but like these guys that put in the groundwork are really, people should not forget those people.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like when we made some scenarios where I think it was an aim lab routine with Agi. Uh, we talked quite a bit in
Mm,
a Discord text chat, and we iterated over the stuff quite a bit with other aimers too.
mm-hmm,
Uh, and him just being so available and paying so much attention and trying so many things and just trying to put our like yapping into something real. It's a amazing skill.
mm,
Like
for
Thomas,
sure.
for example, who made, I think, most of the season 5 stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He did an amazing job.
Mm.
Like those are the best benchmarks I think
I
I've seen.
I think like I've been critical of some of Voltaic stuff, but I think season 5 and VDM 2 is really the best stuff I've seen come out of them so far, personally.
Mhm.
But one thing that I want to ask you about is I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Um, I guess I'm seeing similarities between season 5 and the CAT or CB benchmarks. Have you tried those benches?
Oh no, I haven't actually.
Okay,
Could
I
you
would.
send me a link real quick or something?
Yeah, of course. So the the CAT and the CB benchmarks are made by the wallpaper guy and his group, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And when I was playing season 5, um, I was like, this. Some of these scenarios are very, very a similar approach, one might say. Try to find the
Mm-hmm.
community one. Benches. Oops, KovaaK's. Uh, well, I can't find the CB ones, but I'm pretty sure they're up on his Twitter, on Wallpaper's Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. We have wide, micro. I guess this is like one more four targets.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. This is some.
If
This is like the passo one. Yes.
if you search for CB or CAT, like CB track, CB switch, those are I think they're called community benches, and then you have the CAT, which is, well, cats. Some similarities can be found. I'm not saying that they're like taken
Mm-hmm.
or anything, but like Sharp Track is very similar to the Ether one, I think, for
Yeah,
example.
that's definitely possible. Honestly, I think like even years ago, it's kind of similar people trying
Hmm.
to actually break aiming into subcategories, and this
Yeah.
knowledge is shared quite often with
Mm,
examples to scenarios. Because I've been in different groups that made. I mean, I was my opinion was asked for certain benchmarks. Some
yeah.
were released, some weren't, and I think it's because quite often these ideas are kind of starting from the same like
Same
origin.
people.
Yeah, of course it
Okay.
gets developed over time, but if someone sees that something is working and it seems good, uh,
They
obviously
they
they
put their own
will
spin
use
on
the
it.
same. Yeah, just
Yeah.
at least a little bit. I think
Okay.
right now the subcategories are pretty well defined. So this was like years of work of like a lot of people.
Hmm.
Yeah, but there is a possibility. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I have no idea to either. I just thought of that like really quickly, and
Mhm.
I it's really I want people and I want me as well to get the insider information to how it is to actually be in an aim group, how these work. Are they just random people or do they actually work together? You know, stuff like this that people who never been in an aim group are
Mhm.
sometimes curious about, right?
Yeah.
I had something else on my mind. Right, the one thing that's you mentioned about the and we'll use this as a closing point, I think, because we've been yapping for way too long.
Okay.
One thing that I think is really important is to, let's say you have reactive. I value breaking reactive down into different areas of reactive rather than just being, hey, this is reactive. You know what I mean? I think
Mhm.
that's something that benches could improve on.
Mhm.
Do you feel the same, or do you feel like, no, reactive, like people understand that, and that's it?
Ooh. Well, it's the only thing that can really be different at this point, I think, is kind of playing with the amount of smoothness and the amount of reactivity scenario needs. Like we have row control, for example, which is, or I mean, I made a mistake. It's a Aether, yes. That's like really reactivity based. And what could be done is it could introduce some slightly different patterns to make it slightly more about reading rather than just pure reactive.
Mm,
So this is
yeah.
where people could still play with some variables and see how those scenarios would turn out and what they would measure, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Awakened also says the movement scenarios that I played were from you, and I saw improvement running them from the other way. Didn't see results in game with video. Awesome. Love to hear that. Love to hear that. Good. Good on you. Movement scenarios. Play them. Play them. Trust me. Play them. Really useful. Um, lastly, last question I want to ask you, because it sort of goes back to the variety versus repetition whole thing.
Mhm.
When I made my STS benchmarks, I used essentially a group of people to test them of different skill levels. But my thing was really that, and you don't have to have played them or know. STS benches that I've made are essentially like different. How would you say it? What's the word for it? My brain is lagging. Different levels. So you would do level one, and that would be one playlist, and then level two, it would be another playlist, and you have a score to go off that. Um, and that sort of bases off like repetition versus variety. So when a new person comes in and he says, hey, I want to start aim training, and he finds the Voltaic benchmarks and he plays them and plays them and plays them and doesn't see result in game, do you think that's because he's overly focusing on score? He's overly focusing on benches? Are the benches bad? Do you think you should use another approach, or do you think what's your general thoughts about that? We covered it a little bit, but maybe we.
Mhm. Okay. Well, um, thing is, the benches look at all kinds of different things, and
Mm,
if you play like CS, for example, and you're really trying to get a row control score, it might not translate as much as getting a better floating heads or a popcorn score.
yeah.
Um, One part is that. Another is if these are all the scenarios you kind of know, um, I don't think that's a good thing for your long-term uh, progress as a player. It's just like in strength training too. Like the little bit like the West Side method. I don't know if you know about that.
I'm not sure. No.
Yeah, they were powerlifters, and well, they had the max effort, some repetitive work, and some explosive work,
Okay.
and
Okay.
like they used a lot of variations of the main lifts of squat, bench, deadlift, and their team had incredible results. Of course, they used gear and everything, but
Yeah.
still, they were the first, I think, who had like amazing results, and they were they were built around the framework of Louis Simmons.
Mm.
And yeah, so I think variety is really important, and especially when you start out, it might be good to stick for a week or two to one thing, but then you should definitely try to check something else out, because you have to see like what what is your flavor of aim training. What is it that
Mm.
you want? What do you find fun? What makes it better for you in game? Like,
Yeah.
you have to experiment. You need a lot of stimuli, and as you get more and more, you will be less lost. Hopefully, if you actually analytically think through, like, this did this and that did that, and after some time, you will uh, be able to filter through scenarios um, so
As your
well that,
knowledge gains. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So structured routines are really good with guides to get knowledge and experiment, like why the scenario orders are like that. Just hypothesize, and then
Yeah.
you can just later on see what's up and check it out. But if you just stick to like the first 15 scenarios, hypothetically, you could still become amazing, but it would probably be really boring and really like way you would need way more uh, I would argue VOD reviewing
Yeah.
than if you played more variety.
Because one thing I see consistently is people who have played aim trainers for quite some time and then they get off benches after doing benchmarks for so long, and that's when they start seeing in-game improvement. And I think it's related to sort of something similar you said, where like if you're playing CS, you won't get as much benefit from the tracking based playlist, which mainly it's more tracking based, for example. But I think it also comes down from somewhat a metric of not focusing, not overly focusing on scores, and not only using scores as a metric, but also being a little bit more on aware of technique and a little bit long-term aim and like your mistakes and
Yeah,
your patterns and stuff like that. Because when you're playing a bench, your only goal is to push yourself as much as possible. That may lead to some issues at times for some people, and it may, you may not have the time to work on like, hey, I want to confirm, hey, I want to do this, hey, I want to,
yeah.
work on the raw patterns you will build.
Actually, I tried to build something that would be able to quantify certain things about aim based on a VOD. Um, but the problem is it's really difficult to define the different things and what metrics show exactly what, you know.
Mm,
If it was possible to say that you play a scenario and let's say you get a score, even in like the game itself, not necessarily outside, you would be scored on different skills. That would be the best thing ever for improving by your own. Like, let's
yeah.
say you play like a static and it scores you on the flick, the overflick, the initial flick accuracy, and all that stuff. It would be you would know actually what to improve. But now we don't have this, so we have to rely more on just the intuition stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I want to get your thoughts quickly, just because I'm curious and because I want to use this opportunity. What I mean, you maybe haven't checked my STS benches out, but what's your opinion on doing benches like that in a leveled way rather than playing the same thing, over? Do you think that's might work? It's like not good, it's bad. It's what are your thoughts? And be completely honest. Like I won't be like, oh no, he doesn't like my shit. Like I want complete brutal honesty.
Mhm. Honestly, I think if the goal, I wouldn't even really call it a benchmark. I would call it some kind of a progressive playlist. I think
Yeah.
that's the best uh, tool to improve as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. As soon as you hit a threshold on some scenario, you should go and do something more difficult.
Mm,
I think it's like but it's of course really difficult. Like you need a lot of testing and stuff to
Yeah.
have reasonable levels, reasonable scores, and reasonable swaps, and then explaining that to people as well. Like it's not as simple as you. I mean, for me, it was not as simple as I thought it would be. You know, like if you hit this on this, then you're gonna swap to that, and that's true for everything else. So I think it's a really good idea. Think if there was a complete system that would take a player from completely that could take a player from completely beginner to top one, this kind of method has the highest chance of doing that
Yeah.
if executed perfectly, of course.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. I tested it with many different people, and I think the number one issue I saw with it, just to critique my own work, was that some people were, for example, we're stuck on like stage one, for example, and they wouldn't know how to progress away from that. And I essentially did the stages to work on different issues. So one stage will work on overflicking, one stage will work on reactive, whatever it is. So people still struggle with like, hey, if I'm stuck on stage one, what should I do? But just a tip
Oh, I
for people
see.
that if step one is fundamentals and you struggle with fundamentals, the answer is sort of fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
But it's difficult, as you said, to explain to people who're not as into it as we are, essentially.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say?
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
This is my first time doing this. It was really good. I hope we could help people. Uh, just writing these down is way more difficult because I'm not really prompted on different topics. But when we have like live questions and I have your uh, side as well, makes it one way more interesting, two way more complete. So
I th- I think so too.
thank you. Yeah.
I think so. Thank you for coming. You did really well.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for answering all the questions and being here. It was a very long stream, so
Oh,
thank you
yeah.
for thugging it out for us.
Ah, of course, man. Of course.
Okay, and everybody on this stream, thank you everybody on the stream for being here. Hope you guys learned something, as Krascsi said, and enjoyed the rest of your day, people. See you later.
Yes. Have a good day. Bye.